Chapter 2083. But, Su said hesitantly. Summoning the 10 great sacred artifacts and awakening the armillary shield is still a little difficult for Miss Shangwan now. To be safe, Miss Shangwan should wait until you become a weapon-refining venerable before making a decision. Chu Luyue nodded. She understood what Su meant. Summoning the 10 great sacred artifacts was definitely not an easy task. Even if she was the owner of the armillary shield now, it was still difficult to do it. It was already difficult for her to deal with 3 sacred artifacts at the same time, let alone 10. In addition, once the armillary shield is awakened, its power is amazing. Although Miss Shangwan is powerful and has tempered her divine body with the God-destroying tribulation, if you can use it in the God realm, your success rate will increase a lot. Su said seriously, and Chu Luyue also listened carefully. Thank you for your advice, Mr. Su. I will remember it in my heart. Chu Luyue's hand slowly brushed across the armillary shield. Although she also wanted to see the true power of the armillary shield, now was obviously not the right time. Before that, she had to improve her strength first. Feeling the uneven secret text under her finger, Chu Luyue asked curiously. I have one more thing to ask. Mr. Su, do you recognize the secret text on this? Su shook her head. Chu Luyue's heart sank slightly. In fact, she had already guessed this when she heard Su talk about the things that happened in the past. It was just that she was unwilling to give up and had to ask clearly. Originally, she thought that she could get some clues from Tang Ku. However, to be able to see Su and learn about the secrets of the armillary shield, this trip was not in vain. The so-called inheritance of Tang Ku did not exist. The secret to becoming a weapon-refining saint was the armillary shield and the 10 great sacred artifacts. For Su, Tang Ku really put in a lot of effort and did not hesitate to wait for 10,000 years. Although she was tricked into entering, after knowing the cause and effect, she could not be angry no matter what. She could only sigh endlessly. Chu Luyue's mind calmed down. Since you have woken up now, how about, you go out with me? Su heard this and was slightly stunned. Go out? Yeah. Chu Luyue looked around. Although this place was full of energy, it was too lonely. As far as the eye could see, one would only feel a deep sense of loneliness. He really did not know how Tang Ku had endured for such a long time. She smiled at Su. If Senior Tang Ku sees you again, he will definitely be very happy. At the mention of Tang Ku, Su's expression wavered. In fact, that battle back then was the first time the two of them had met, and it was also the only time. After that, her physical body was destroyed and her soul scattered. If it wasn't for Tang Ku, she would have died long ago. You're finally willing to come out. Tang Ku's gaze fell on Su, and for a moment he was in a daze. Her appearance was exactly the same as when he first saw her, and there was no change at all. At this moment, he even felt that everything had happened yesterday. The long years in between were just a dream. Su's heart skipped a beat, but she was the first to react. Tang Ku. Long time no see. Tang Ku suddenly came back to his senses, suppressed the waves in his heart, and slowly smiled. Long time no see. Chu Luyue's eyes swept back and forth between the two of them, and said with a smile, the two of you have been separated for a long time, and now that you finally meet, you should have a lot to say. We won't disturb you for now. As she spoke, she walked to Rongxiu's side, gently nudged him with her elbow, and asked in a low voice, when did Senior Tang Ku come out? Rongxiu held her hand and pulled her in front of him. He looked around carefully for a while, and only when he was sure that she was all right, did he relax. Hearing Chu Luyue's question, he thought for a moment. About an hour ago. Chu Luyue calculated in her heart, that was about the time Su woke up. It seemed that Tang Ku should know the situation inside. She blinked and asked again, then, did Senior Tang make things difficult for you? Rong Xiu's sword-like eyebrows raised slightly, and he smiled casually. That's not it. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2084. Creak, the door, which had been quiet for a long time, finally made a sound. Sheng Wanjing and the others, who were waiting outside, immediately perked up and looked over. The door slowly opened, and a tall figure walked out. It was Rong Xiu. Behind him, Chu Liuyue's figure also entered the crowd's eyes. You, Sheng Wanjing was delighted. He quickly stepped forward and looked at the two of them seriously. How are you? Chu Liyue smiled and said, Taizu, don't worry. Everything is going well. The atmosphere and the surroundings suddenly became subtle. Many people secretly exchanged glances. Does this mean that she has successfully obtained Tang Ke's inheritance? After all, she had won that competition. Tang Ke had also shown that he admired her very much. It was reasonable for him to teach her everything. This also meant that in the future, she was very likely to break through to become a refining saint. With Sheng Wanjing, this family was probably invincible. Sheng Wanjing was also excited. That's good. That's good. He knew that you, would definitely be able to do it. After a moment, someone in the crowd finally asked boldly, May I ask Holy Son and Master Yu how is Senior Tang Ke now? They had come out. Then, what about Tang Ke? He still had a strand of his soul left behind. Chu Liyue looked at the person who asked and smiled calmly. Senior Tang Ke said that he was already used to staying here. Now that everything is over, he will completely seal this place and never come out again. When everyone heard this, they were first surprised, then regretful. In that case, wouldn't they have no chance to come and ask for advice in the future? Rong Xiu glanced at everyone and narrowed his eyes. Family Wei is not here. Hearing what he said, Chu Liyue realized that Wei Zhe was indeed not here. That was strange. With Wei Zhe's temperament and style, he didn't seem to leave before they came out, right? Sheng Wanjing explained, 3 days ago, Family Wei's people came and said that there was an urgent matter that he needed to deal with personally. So he left with his people. Rong Xiu smiled. I see. It seems like the head of the Family Wei is really busy. Chu Liuyue's thoughts turned, and the corners of his lips curved slightly. I originally planned to bid farewell to the head of the Family Wei, but now it seems that I shouldn't disturb you. Since that's the case, we'll leave first. If fate wills it in the future, we'll naturally meet again. He was about to leave. Many people felt empty inside when they heard this. Everyone had come here with high hopes. Now that they didn't get anything, they naturally felt that it was a pity. But if he wanted to leave, they couldn't stop him. Moreover, after this incident, Chu Liyue, who had obtained Tang Ke's inheritance, would definitely have a bright future. Building a good relationship was much better than making enemies. Immediately, many people bid farewell to them in an amiable manner, speaking and behaving very politely. Chu Liyue accepted it all and also took his leave with a chuckle. After some tossing and turning, the group finally left. Only when their figures had completely disappeared did the rest of the crowd gradually disperse. Family Yi. In the study, Jun Zhiqing sat behind the table, looking at something. A figure hurried over. It was Yi Wenzhua. He went straight to the door and waved his hand at the 2 guards who were about to salute. You can leave first. This old man has something to say to the 9 ministers. The 2 guards looked at each other. Without the orders of the head of the family, they didn't dare to leave without permission. Even if this person was Yi Wenzhua. At this moment, Jun Zhiqing's voice came from the room. You can leave first. Hearing this, the 2 immediately heaved a sigh of relief, respectfully responded, and left. Yi Wenzuo walked in and locked the door. After making sure that no one else was here, he looked at Jun Zhiqing, who was sitting in the room. A crack appeared on the calm expression on his face, as if he was trying to hold back something. Jun Zhiqing looked up and smiled. "Master, why are you here at this time?" Yi Wenzuo walked in front of him without saying a word and looked at him with a complicated gaze. His gaze was suspicious and scrutinizing. After a long while, he asked in a deep voice. "Big brother's death has something to do with you." This big brother was, of course, Yi Wentao. The smile on Jun Zhiqing's face faded a little, and he asked in surprise. "Why do you say that, master?" "I heard that before he died that day, the only person he saw was you." Yi Wenzuo stared at him, his fists clenched in his sleeves. "9 ministers, do you dare say that this matter has nothing to do with you?" Jun Zhiqing paused and said, "That's right, I did go to see the head of the family that day. Because the subordinates kept saying that he was unwilling to use medicine, I wanted to persuade him. Unfortunately, the head of the family had lost his cultivation and no longer had the will to continue living. He chose to self-destruct because he couldn't accept the fact that he had become a cripple. This kind of life made him despair, and he would rather die. Master, a person like the head of the family has been proud his whole life. It's normal for him to make such a choice, isn't it?" Jun Zhiqing's tone was calm, but his words were sharp and incisive. Yi Wenzuo frowned. He had to admit that what he said was indeed very reasonable. But he still felt that something was wrong. Yi Wenzuo stared at Jun Zhiqing, as if trying to find some clues from his face. But he couldn't find anything. Yi Wenzuo suddenly realized that he couldn't see through him at all. He took a deep breath and finally asked in a deep voice. "Even so, then, what do you say about the family way?" Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2085. Family Way. What about them? Jun Zhiqing raised his eyebrows slightly, as if he did not understand the meaning of his words. Yi Wenzuo snorted coldly and lowered his voice. "You've been in contact with Wei Zhe for a long time, haven't you?" Jun Zhiqing smiled, and there was a hint of devilishness in his eyes. "Master, family Yi and family Wei have always been in contact. Now that I'm the head of the family, isn't it normal for me to be in contact with Wei Zhe?" "You clearly know that's not what I mean." Yi Wenzuo took a deep breath. "Others may not know, but I do. That 10,000 Peaks halberd clearly belongs to family Yi. There are no more than 3 people in the entire divine ruins who know about this. But now, the 10,000 Peaks halberd has appeared in Wei Zhe's hands out of the blue. Other than you, who else can quietly take away the 10,000 Peaks halberd?" If anyone else was here and heard this, they would definitely be greatly shocked. Everyone thought that family Yi only had one sacred artifact, which was Yi Wentao's great azure sun axe. But in reality, the 10,000 Peaks halberd had belonged to them thousands of years ago. It was just that Yi Wentao had always kept a low profile when it came to such matters, so he deliberately concealed the existence of the 10,000 Peaks halberd. Yi Wenzuo only knew about it because he was Yi Wentao's younger brother. Recently, the matter of Tang's tomb in the rocky forest had caused a great uproar, and news of the 10,000 Peaks halberd had already spread. In the rocky forest, in order to try to open Tang's tomb, Wei Zhe had taken out the 10,000 Peaks halberd. Unfortunately, it had not succeeded, and in the end, the 10,000 Peaks halberd had recognized Rong Xiao as its master. The latter was the most important point. Now, the 10,000 Peaks halberd has fallen into Rong Xiao's hands and has become his. Are you satisfied? But they didn't even have the right to make a fuss. This time, they had really suffered a loss. Jun Zhiqing's expression became much calmer. To tell you the truth, the 10,000 Peaks halberd was lent to Wei Zhe temporarily. But at that time, He only said that he wanted to borrow a sacred weapon forged by Tang Ke back then to open Tang Ke's tomb and that he would return it after using it. I didn't expect the things that happened after that. You actually lent out such an important thing so easily? Yi Wentao asked in disbelief. Something seemed to be surging wildly in his chest. The Sun Great Axe has already been taken by Shengguanyu. Now, even the myriad peaks halberd has become Rongxiu's. Jiuqing, what are you thinking? Jun Jiuqing looked at him calmly. Master, allow me to remind you that it's a sacred weapon. Sacred artifacts had spirits, and they had always chosen their own masters. Without this opportunity, even if one guarded it for thousands of years, they still wouldn't be able to obtain its recognition. On the other hand, some people were destined to become its master. This was something that could not be stopped. Although he didn't like Rongxiu, this kind of thing couldn't be changed by force. Yi Wentao was speechless. He frowned and looked at Jun Jiuqing with a complicated expression. He suddenly realized that he didn't seem to understand him at all. At this moment, Jun Jiuqing's expression was indifferent, and his eyes were deep. Even though Yi Wentao had been his master for many years, he didn't know what he was thinking at this moment. Yi Wentao was suddenly at a loss. Did Jun Jiuqing become like this after becoming the head of family Yi, or was he always like this? You deliberately gave the myriad peaks halberd to Wei Zhe. He said slowly and firmly. You and Wei Zhe worked together to spread the news about Tang Ke's tomb, right? Jun Jiuqing didn't say anything. Yi Wentao closed his eyes. What are you trying to do? You're already the head of family Yi. Why? He didn't realize it before, but now he realized that Jun Jiuqing's actions seemed to be premeditated. Master, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. Jun Jiuqing said and stood up. Family Yi's vitality has been greatly damaged, and it's time for them to rest. There are many things that they need your help with. You must take care of yourself. Yi Wentao suddenly felt a chill slowly rising from the soles of his feet. Chu Luyue and the others successfully left the stone forest and returned to Peach Blossom Cove. It had been nearly 2 months since the day they left. To Chu Luyue's joy, Shengguanyu and Chu Ning had both come. Shengguanyu had already broken through to the high god level, and Chu Ning had also broken through to the 9th stage in a short period of time. He was only 1 step away from the high god level. One had to know that he had started cultivating from the 1st stage. This speed was already heaven-defying. Moreover, he had the indestructible divine body. Even if he hadn't broken through to the high god level yet, he still had extremely strong combat power. The news in the stone forest had spread. Everyone knew that Chu Luyue had obtained Tang Ke's inheritance and was very likely to become the next weapon refining saint in the future. The entire Peach Blossom Cove was jubilant. However, Shengguanyu didn't stay for too long. After seeing Chu Luyue, he only stayed for a few days before leaving. After all, he still needed someone to look after the Tianling dynasty. Although Chu Luyue was reluctant, he still sent someone to send him back. Now that she was the master of Peach Blossom Cove, many things were much more convenient. She didn't have to worry about going in and out of the Divine Ruins world. She could return at any time, and Shengguanyu could also come over at any time. Chu Ning stayed behind and focused on his cultivation. Now, Chu Luyue was his only family and the person he cared about the most. There was no point in returning to Yaoqin. It was better to stay and use the cultivation environment of Peach Blossom Cove to improve his strength. Everything was gradually on the right track. On this day, Chu Luyue came to Qingshui Cliff. She was accompanied by Sanson. Sanson followed behind. As he walked, he said, "Master, if you need any medicinal herbs, just let me know. There's no need for you to come here personally, right? Look at how busy you are every day." Chu Luyue waved her hand. "I'm not sure what I need, so I came to take a look first." Sanson scratched his head. I see. Then what do you want to do, Master? Why don't you tell me? Maybe I can help you. Chu Luiyue laughed and looked back at him, her eyes full of suspicion. You? Sanson coughed and straightened his back. Yes. Of course. Don't think that I'm not very talented in celestial physician. Recently, I've read a lot of ancient books and studied a lot of secret recipes. It was rare for Sanson to be so diligent. Chu Luiyue knew without asking that he was definitely trying to open up new markets. She chuckled. You really can't help me with this. Sanson was a little unconvinced. You can't look down on me like this. If you tell me, maybe I can really help. Chu Luiyue stood still and raised her chin. Open. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2086. Even Sheng Wanjing, Nan Suhuai, and the others were surprised. They knew very well that Chu Luiyue didn't have a divine body before. Now, this must have been cultivated during this period of time. What kind of divine body is that? Brother Shengwan, why do I feel that it's different from yours? Zhao Song asked curiously. Since Chu Luiyue was Shengwan Jing's descendant and had his bloodline, they thought that she should have cultivated the same divine body. Shengwan Jing shook his head. I don't know when you cultivated the divine body. Besides, she's very talented. Maybe she chose the most suitable divine body for herself. Zhao Song nodded thoughtfully. This statement was not without reason. Every cultivator's physique and talent were different. Even people from the same family would sometimes choose different divine bodies to cultivate. Shengwan Jing looked at Chu Luiyue's divine body carefully for a while, but he still couldn't recognize it. He turned to Nan Suhuai and asked in a low voice, Dean Nan, do you recognize Yu's divine body? Even though he had seen a lot, he still couldn't recognize it. Although Nan Suhuai's seniority was lower than his, as the dean of Lingxiao College, he had countless precious ancient books and should know more than him. Besides, Yu was a student of Lingxiao College. If she cultivated the divine body, she should have learned it from there. To his surprise, Nan Suhuai shook his head. I don't know either. After pausing for a while, Nan Suhuai saw that Shengwan Jing and the others were a little surprised. Then, he said, actually. Senior Shengwan, when Yu was in the college, she read a lot of related books and tried to cultivate it many times. There were many top divine bodies, but she couldn't succeed. So, I'm relieved to see that she has successfully cultivated her own divine body. But I don't know the origin of this divine body. Since Nan Suhuai said so, it must be true. Suddenly, Rong Xiu's cold and deep voice sounded. You just went through the God-destroying tribulation some time ago. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a dead silence. God-destroying tribulation. Shengwan Jing suddenly thought of something and gasped. You mean? Rong Xiu's thin scarlet lips curved slightly and he nodded gently. Her god body was refined by the God-destroying tribulation. Whoosh! Chu Luiyue tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and his body instantly shot out like an arrow. He drew a straight red line in the air and went straight for Yi Wentao. The two of them faced each other, and the distance between them was rapidly shrinking. Compared to Yi Wentao's exceptionally tall and sturdy omnidirectional divine body, Chu Luiyue's figure seemed exceptionally small. It was as if Yi Wentao could easily kill her with a single strike. In fact, Yi Wentao thought the same. When he saw Chu Luiyue summon the godly body, he was a little surprised, but it was only for a moment. She was the exalted god, and it was normal for her to have a godly body. There was nothing to be surprised about. Although Yi Wentao could not tell what godly body she cultivated at first glance, there were hundreds and thousands of ways to cultivate godly bodies in this world. He could not possibly know all of them. Even if he could not tell, it did not matter. He did not need to pay attention to it at all. Because his omnidirectional divine body was the top existence among all godly bodies. It was also because of this unique and powerful godly body that he had always been the head of the family all these years. Now, Chu Luiyue was planning to fight him head-on with her godly body. It seemed that her brain was really muddled. Wentao sneered and threw a punch. The wind from the punch suddenly arrived. The strong wind came head-on and swept up Chu Luiyue's black hair. She stared straight ahead, and the power in her body was continuously gathering in her right hand at this moment. Then, she raised her arm directly and threw a punch, meeting Wentao's punch. Gasps could be heard from the crowd. Chu Luiyue chose to fight Wentao head-on. Wouldn't she, a mere high god, lose in such a hand-to-hand fight? This punch would probably cripple her even if she did not die. Wentao sneered. It's been so long, but her arrogance hasn't changed at all. She was like this a few years ago, and she's still like this a few years later. In fact, she's becoming more and more arrogant. Jun Juqing stared at the field with a devilish look in his eyes, and his hands slowly clenched in his sleeves. He did not respond to Wentao's words. However, the family and Nan family members behind him had the same attitude as Wentao. That's right. That Shangguan really thinks that she's great just because she has some talent. She doesn't know that there's always someone better than her. How can the gap between a high god and a high god be so easily bridged? Even if her crimson gold celestial phoenix successfully opened its 5th meridian, I'm afraid it's too late. This time, it's finally over. Chu Luiyue turned a deaf ear to the noise. Her eyes burned with a strong desire to fight, and she pressed forward with indomitable will. Bam! Their fists collided. There was a dull thud. After a short pause, the ground around the two of them began to crack rapidly. The cracks spread like a spider web. It was obvious that the collision of the two of them in this fight was terrifying. However, what shocked everyone was that Chu Luiyue did not fly out as expected. She did not even move back half an inch. Everyone was stunned. Chu Luiyue actually took the full blow of Wentao's omnidirectional divine body. There was silence. Only the two of them were still fighting each other. Green and dazzling lights intertwined, and it was almost impossible to open one's eyes. Dark red blood slowly seeped out of the corner of Chu Luiyue's mouth, and it made her look even paler. However, she was still standing on the same spot, facing off against Wentao. At this moment, the surrounding Xian formations that had not been destroyed suddenly moved. Wentao's divine body had destroyed the few Xian formations in the center and passed through them to fight with Chu Luiyue. Therefore, Wentao's divine body was standing on one side of the Xian formations, while his physical body was standing on the other side. Now, these Xian formations were operating very quickly, and they connected with each other again, filling up the broken parts and forming a complete giant net, which was heading towards Wentao's physical body. Wentao was originally standing at the back, waiting to see Chu Luiyue get dealt with. Suddenly, he felt that something was wrong, and when he looked, he realized that he was surrounded by those Xian formations again. Moreover, although there were fewer Xian formations than before, the power on them did not decrease at all. In fact, it seemed to have become stronger. Feeling the terrifying pressure, Wentao's heart skipped a beat. How can this be? Chu Luiyue's origin power should be almost depleted. Chu Luiyue's gaze turned slightly, and her red lips suddenly curved into a cold arc. I forgot to say. Although I'm only a high god, the origin power in your body may not be comparable to mine. Mobile users, please browse and read for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 2087. I've seen it with my own eyes. Chu Luiyue didn't say that out loud. Suli didn't look like she was faking it. She was such a powerful being that there were countless high gods and even venerables who were willing to follow her. Since she had said so, it was most likely true. But if that was the case, then, what was going on with Debeo? Chu Luiyue remembered clearly that he had rebuilt his divine body in the Red Moon Desert. And at that time, in order to save her, he had transformed into a child in a moment of desperation. Speaking of external help. At the last moment, Debeo had used her blood. But Chu Luiyue didn't take it to heart. Judging from the reaction of Debeo and the other two, they didn't want her help from the beginning. They were planning to rebuild their divine bodies by themselves. So much so that Chu Luiyue had always thought that everyone was like that. But after hearing Su Li's words, she realized that her understanding was wrong. You. Su Li reached out and waved her hand in front of Chu Luiyue. What are you thinking? Chu Luiyue came back to her senses and smiled. Nothing. Actually, I've heard this from others. So it's wrong. Then, Mr. Su, is there really no one in this world who can do this? You mean to say that one can rebuild their divine body purely with their own strength? Su Li didn't see the abnormality in her expression and thought that she had misheard. She shook her head gently. I've never heard of such a thing. Chu Luiyue lowered her eyes. But, Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly as if she was thinking about something. Maybe someone stronger than venerables can do it. Who knows? Chu Luiyue looked up at her in surprise. Someone, stronger than venerables? Yes. But such a powerful person only exists in legends. Even Tang Ku and I have never seen such a person. By the way, I heard that you're a student of Lingxiao College. Yes. Some people say that the first dean of Lingxiao College was such a person. It's just that no one has personally verified it. Later on, he mysteriously disappeared without a trace. Those rumors about him were gradually drowned out by time, and no one mentioned it anymore. Su Li shook her head regretfully. Chu Luiyue's heart was in turmoil. In that case, Debeo, seeing Chu Luiyue fall into silence, Su Li thought that she was still worried about the matter of reconstructing her physical body, so she comforted her. You don't have to worry too much. Even if you don't succeed in the end, it doesn't matter. Even if I don't have a physical body, I'm already very satisfied with this soul. Needless to say, she could still come out and see the wind and sunlight, and see all kinds of people in this world. To her, this was already extremely fortunate. Chu Luiyue collected his thoughts, and the emotions in his eyes were completely restrained. She smiled. No matter what, let's try it first. You manner. In the study, Rong Xiao was writing something. Umo walked in hurriedly. Your Highness. There's news from the family way. Rong Xiao didn't stop what he was doing. Speak. Umo said. Some time ago, the family way's elder, Wei Qihan, did go out alone once. No one knows where he went or what he did. Rong Xiao's expression was calm, and his voice was light. What about the family Yi? Umo lowered his head. The family Yi has been in chaos for a long time. It only calmed down after Yi Wentao died. However, because Yi Wentao self-destructed and suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of Madame at Peach Blossom Cove, the family Yi felt embarrassed and didn't hold a grand funeral. They only buried him in a hurry. As for the Thousand Peaks halberd, it didn't cause much of a stir. That was natural. After all, the number of family Yi who knew about the existence of the Thousand Peaks halberd could be counted on one hand. Rong Xiao smiled. What's there to bury when the body and soul are destroyed? It's just a formality. Jun Zhiqing's ability to make an example out of someone was getting better and better. Umo sighed. No matter what, Yi Wentao was once a powerful figure in the family Yi. No one in the family dared to say no to him in the past 100 years. Who knew that he would end up like this after his death? The past is the past after all. Rong Xiu put down his pen and picked up the paper in his hand to read it again. Jun Juqing had worked hard to get to where he was today. Naturally, he had to seize every opportunity to gain a foothold. Yi Wentao was just a stepping stone for him. The family Yi was originally very unwilling to stand on his side. Many of them were eyeing the position of the head of the family covetously. However, all of this quietly subsided with Yi Wentao's death. Everyone could see that Jun Juqing was definitely involved in Yi Wentao's death. However, this was the result that Jun Juqing wanted. Sometimes, forceful suppression was faster and more effective than any conciliatory method. He paused. Jun Juqing has always been a smart person. Umo asked hesitantly. Then, Your Highness, are you going to let them collude like this? Jun Juqing is determined to take down the family Yi. For this reason, he didn't hesitate to give away Wan Feng halberd and use the family Yi to send I away. Since that's the case, I will give him face. Although he didn't care about Wan Feng halberd, it was a good opportunity to bring Tang Ku and Su Li out and establish Yu's prestige. Wei Zhe will contact the family Yi in the future. Just wait and see. Umo immediately replied, yes. At this moment, someone else walked in from outside the door. It was Yan Qing. Your Highness. As soon as Yan Qing walked in, he knelt down and bowed. His brows were slightly furrowed, and his expression was somewhat heavy. Umo rarely saw such an expression, and his heart couldn't help but skip a beat. Could it be that something happened? Rong Xiu raised his chin. Just stand up and speak. Only then did Yan Qing stand up. He took out a letter from his bosom and said in a deep voice, Your Highness, the patriarch has passed away. 36 Respected Elder Ming sent a letter back and asked you to set off immediately. When Umo heard the first half of the sentence, he didn't realize what was going on. However, when he heard the second half, he immediately widened his eyes in shock and almost jumped up. The patriarch has passed away. This was too sudden. Rong Xiu didn't look surprised. His slender fingers moved slightly, and the paper in his hand flew to Yan Qing. This is the eulogy I wrote for the patriarch. Copy it and distribute it to all the respected elders. Umo turned around with a shocked expression. When he came in, he saw that His Highness was writing something. However, he never expected that he was writing a eulogy for the patriarch. Your Highness. You already know. Yan Qing caught the paper and instantly understood something. He nodded respectfully. Yes. Rong Xiu tilted his head and looked out of the window. There were no clouds in the sky, and the weather was good. Today's weather is good. It was a good day to send someone off. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2088. Chu Luiyue and Su Li discussed and chose some herbs, intending to try a few more times. Maybe they would succeed by a stroke of luck. After a long time, the two of them walked out of the room. Sanson, who was waiting outside, hurried forward with a face full of smiles. Master, Mr. Su. Why did the two of you come out so quickly? Aren't you going to take a look? Chu Luiyue glanced at him. It was rare for this kid to be so generous. Don't you feel bad? What are you talking about? Sanson chuckled. Sanson's herbs are yours. You can just come and take whatever you want. Besides, if these herbs can really help Mr. Su, it's my honor, isn't it? This was the famous Mr. Su. It was rumored that he was one of the only two refining saints in the world of God. Even a venerable god would not dare to be presumptuous in front of such a person. They could not wait to suck up to him. What were these herbs? If they could build a relationship with this person, it would be a huge gain. Suli covered her mouth and smiled. Your subordinate is really interesting. Sanson straightened his back after being praised, and his face was full of joy. Chu Luiyue looked at him sympathetically. Fortunately, Senior Tang Kuo was not here now, otherwise, Mr. Su will be with me during this time, but not many people know about this, Master, don't worry. Sanson knows what to say and what not to say. Sanson immediately made a zipping motion on his mouth. Chu Luiyue nodded with satisfaction. It's good that you know. Actually, she was not worried about this. The people of the 13th U sect were all tight-lipped, especially Sanson. This was also one of the reasons why she brought Sanson with her. I'll have to trouble you, for the rest. After saying that, Su Li's figure flashed and disappeared again. Sanson smacked his lips and still felt that it was unbelievable. While waiting, he had already guessed that Mr. Su must have been brought back by his master when she went to Tang Ku's tomb. Judging from Mr. Su's attitude, he seemed to be quite close to his master. He knew that his master was powerful, but he didn't expect that even someone like Mr. Su could. Sanson gave him a thumbs up and was sincerely convinced. Master, you're really awesome. Sanson believed that she was already very good at making connections, but compared to her master, TSK, they couldn't compare. As long as she followed her master well, what else was impossible? Chu Luiyue was already immune to Sanson's flattery and praise. He raised his chin. Let's go. Chu Luiyue and Sanson quickly returned to the U residence. Naturally, they quickly learned of the news of Bailey Jun's death. He's gone. Chu Luiyue was originally flipping through a medical book. When he heard this, he immediately stopped what he was doing and looked up in surprise. Rong Xiao was sitting by the window drinking tea. Calculating the time, the dangerous months should have passed. This time, she had to go no matter what. Rong Xiao's lips curved up slightly. All right. The next morning, the duo set off for the Yuntian Tower. After a long journey, they finally reached their destination. By the time they arrived at the ethereal hall, the exalted elders were already there. Seeing the two figures walking side by side and entering hand in hand, many people in the hall had complicated feelings. It had only been a few months since their wedding. However, too many things had happened during this period of time. Chu Luiyue had taken over the Peach Blossom Dock and become the head of the Yu clan. Chu Luiyue had made a name for herself after making a bet with Yi Wentao. It was said that she had even recruited many God Realm experts to her side, and the cultivators in Peach Blossom Dock were willing to follow her lead. All in all, even if Chu Luiyue didn't have the identity of the princess consort of the Yuntian Tower, she could still stand on equal footing with any of the top clans in the world of God. Even if the Yu clan's foundation was still shallow, it couldn't stop them from having countless experts and rich resources. Looking at the smiling, slender and exquisite woman, who would have thought that she had actually relied on her own strength to reach her current position? Recalling the mockery and contempt they had for her in the past, many people felt embarrassed. 36 Exalted Elder Ming was delighted, and he was once again impressed by his holy son's eyesight. If it wasn't for the fact that they were discussing Bailey Jun's funeral, he would have welcomed her happily. 36 Exalted Elder Ming coughed and walked forward with a solemn expression. Holy Son. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2089. What's going on with the clan leader? Rong Xiao went straight to the point. 36 Respected Elder Ming cupped his hands. Your Highness, actually, the clan leader's condition has not been very good. Ever since he fell into a coma, the strength in his body has been depleted. We've tried all sorts of methods. He sighed. Moreover, the clan leader is depressed and shows no signs of waking up. We've tried our best, but we're still unable to reverse the situation. The hall suddenly became much quieter. Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows slightly. These words were somewhat interesting. There was nothing much to say about being poisoned and causing him to fall into a coma. But to be depressed, he didn't need to think to know the reason. Back in Fangzhou City, the matter of Bailey Jun mistaking Jiang Jiwon for his bloodline had caused an uproar. No man could stand this kind of thing, let alone someone like Bailey Jun. He had been unparalleled in his life, noble and proud. He had always thought highly of himself. How could he accept such humiliation? Even if no one did anything to him, he probably didn't want to come out to see anyone again. It was fine if no one said anything before, but now that 36 respected elder Ming mentioned it, although it was very vague, everyone knew what was going on. Actually, they also felt embarrassed. Rong Xiu's brows twitched slightly, as if he was somewhat regretful. Some time ago, I and you accidentally found the current nest of the Black Demon Cave. We wanted to force Mo Shiqian to hand over the method to unlock the seal, but who knew that he was so cunning that he didn't hesitate to sacrifice the entire Black Demon Cave subordinates to help himself escape. If I could have stopped him back then, perhaps the clan leader. Everyone in the hall was shocked. There's actually such a thing. That's too dangerous. Fortunately, His Highness and the Princess Consort are safe and sound. That's right. The people of the Black Demon Cave have always been cunning. It's already not easy for His Highness and the Princess Consort to return safely. Other things can't be forced. Because this matter happened outside of the Divine Ruins world, not many people in the Divine Ruins world knew about it. And because Mo Shiqian was still on the run, Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu didn't spread the news. Therefore, not even the revered elders of the Yuntian Tower knew about it. When he heard this, he was naturally filled with shock. Chu Luiyue silently glanced at the man beside her. I don't remember Rong Xiu mentioning anything about Bailey Jun. 36 respected elder Ming hurriedly asked, were His Highness and Princess Consort injured? Rong Xiu's expression was calm as a faint smile appeared on his lips. They're all minor injuries. It's worth it to be able to wipe out the Black Demon Cave. The originally noisy hall once again fell into a strange silence. The patriarch was very controversial when he was alive. Why don't we let him pass away quietly? What do you think? With one person taking the lead, the rest immediately followed suit. That's right, Your Highness. Speaking of which, the patriarch died at the hands of the Black Demon Cave. If this matter was publicized, it would be bad for the reputation of the Yuntian Tower and the patriarch. Shouldn't we keep a low profile? That's right. If the patriarch's spirit is in heaven, he should also wish for this, right? We can all understand Your Highness's feelings, but this matter is not trivial. I hope Your Highness will reconsider. Everyone chimed in and quickly reached a consensus. They all persuaded Rong Xiu to give up on the idea of burying Bailey Jun. Rong Xiu frowned slightly, seemingly hesitant. 36 respected elder Ming cupped his fists and bowed. I hope Your Highness will consider the Yuntian Tower. The bigger picture is more important. Rong Xiu was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, all right. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2090. Yan Qing. Rong Xiu tilted his head slightly. Yan Qing, who was following behind him, immediately stepped forward and took out a stack of papers. This is the eulogy I wrote for the patriarch. Everyone, please burn it in front of the patriarch's tomb to comfort his soul in heaven. After that, Yan Qing went over and distributed the papers. One for each person. There was no mistake. She had done all she could to go this far. There was nothing to nitpick about. Chu Luiyue was in awe as she watched from the side. TSK. In fact, from the beginning, Rong Xiu didn't intend to worry about this matter. What he said just now was just for show. But in this way, everything went smoothly. Even if this matter was spread out later, he would only agree to it because everyone begged him. He wouldn't be blamed at all. Bailey June had been the hegemon of the Yuntian Tower for many years, but in the end, he ended up in such a miserable state. Of course, he had only himself to blame for all this. Bailey June was buried in a hurry. He didn't have any children, and his reputation was ruined because of the incident in Fangzhou City. No one in the entire Yuntian Tower went to pay respects to him. After his death, the name Bailey June seemed to be quickly forgotten by everyone. It was as if this person had never existed here. On the day of his burial, Rongxiu officially became the patriarch of the Yuntian Tower in the main hall of the sacrificial god temple. Everything was carried out in an orderly manner. Chu Luiyuan knew that Rongxiu had his own plans, so he didn't interfere. After arriving at the Yuntian Tower, he went straight to the library. As Rongxiu said, the books in the library of the Yuntian Tower were extremely precious. Some of them were books that Chu Luiyue hadn't even seen in Lingshao College. The number of books in the library was indeed astonishing. Chu Luiyue read very quickly. At first, she only chose medical books, but later, she gradually picked some miscellaneous books. She learned a lot from them, but she still didn't find what she wanted the most. After reading for a few days without sleep, Chu Luiyue couldn't help but feel discouraged. Putting the books in his handbag, Chu Luiyue let out a long breath. Rongxiu walked over. There are so many books. You can't finish reading them in a short time. As he said, he carried her and walked to the small bed beside him. Chu Luiyue originally wanted to struggle, but she really couldn't take it anymore after a few days. Thus, she obediently leaned into his embrace. There were too many books here. Even if she read for half a year, she probably wouldn't be able to finish them all. What if she still couldn't find a solution after reading all of them? Rongxiu, don't you think I'm wasting too much time searching like this? Rongxiu gently placed her on the small couch and sat at the side. Chapter 2091. Rongxiu was originally sitting down, but when she moved, he immediately reached out one hand to support himself on the couch and used the other hand to support her waist. Their bodies were close together. She was on top and he was on the bottom. They could smell each other's breaths. Rongxiu smiled faintly. Are you sure you want to talk to me like this? Chu Luiyue realized that their posture was not right. She blushed and immediately wanted to crawl away. Rongxiu held her waist, raised his head slightly, and kissed her lips. His deep voice was blurred between their lips. I'll go with you. Chu Luiyue thought in a daze that this was not bad. Tang Ke had been following Rongxiu. If the two of them went together, they might be able to help Tang Ke and Suli recover together. Of course, she also wanted to see how Debao and the rest were doing. Sensing that she was distracted, Rongxiu bit her gently. Hiss, Chu Luiyue subconsciously moved back and murmured, feeling wronged. It hurts, Rongxiu chuckled and comforted her patiently. I'll be gentler. Red Moon Desert. Unknowingly, the overwhelming crimson color had quietly dissipated. The blazing sun scorched the vast desert. The terrifyingly high temperature seemed to burn even the air. There was no wind, but heat waves rolled. Only the blue waves in the middle of the desert occasionally rippled. Under the lake, there was a cage that was dark and sunless. The strong smell of blood filled the air. There were dark red bloodstains everywhere, as if an unusually fierce battle had just taken place. 3 figures sat facing each other in a triangle. They were Dugu Maobao and his companions. At this moment, an extremely complicated silver Xian formation was floating above their heads, rotating slowly. A faint glow enveloped the 3 of them. It was extremely powerful. If Chu Luiyue was here, he would definitely discover that this profound formation was extremely similar to the one summoned by Lingshao College on Thousand Wine Mountain, but it was even more complicated and obscure. Under the profound formation, there was a palm-sized black shadow at the center of the three people. There seemed to be some kind of strange pattern on the shadow, but it was incomplete and could not be distinguished. Time passed slowly, and the shadow gradually faded away. When the last dot completely disappeared, the profound formation above the three people's heads also stopped rotating at the same time, and then dissipated with a loud bang. Puff! Dugu Mabao's body shook and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Diwu Zhang's and Lan Zhao's conditions weren't any better. Their auras had become much weaker. Madhav *Ker, he's so hard to deal with. Diwu Zhangzi forced himself to hold on, and couldn't help but curse. Fortunately, Yu and Rongxiu released this old man's aura, otherwise, he might not have been able to make it through this time. He looked at Dugu Mabao and Lan Xiao. How are you guys? Dugu Mabao raised his hand, wiped the blood from the corner of his lips, and slowly opened his eyes. I'm fine. Lan Xiao was still chained up, and he could only barely move when he heard that. He raised a hand, covered half of his face, and laughed. What a pity. I was quite satisfied with this face this time, but it was ruined just like that. Diwu Zhangzi frowned. You're still thinking about this at a time like this. Although that was what he said, he still heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Lan Xiao still had the mood to talk about this. Lan Zhao's mouth twitched, and the face under his hand was already badly damaged. Pfft, don't worry, I won't die. It's not that easy to take my life. It's naturally not easy to kill you when you're at your peak, but it's not difficult to take your life now. Dugu Mabao looked over coldly, and his voice didn't fluctuate as he spoke. Lan Xiao pursed his lips and tried hard to roll his eyes. I knew you wouldn't say anything good. Dugu Mabao ignored him and continued, your soul can't last for too long. If you can't reconstruct your divine body as soon as possible, it's only a matter of time before your soul disperses. After saying that, the surroundings went silent for a moment. They all knew that Dugu Mabao was speaking the truth. After a while, Lan Xiao leaned lazily against the stone wall behind him and muttered with a headache, reconstruct your divine body. It's easy to say, but do you think everyone is as sick as you? Moreover, he had already failed once before, which made things worse. He could barely survive the dangerous months this time because of Dugu Mabao and Diwu Zhangzi's help. How could it be so easy to reconstruct his divine body? Then, the corners of his mouth twitched as he chuckled nonchalantly. It's fine even if I can't survive. I've been trapped in this lousy place for so long. Even if you guys aren't annoyed, I'm annoyed, Dugu Mabao said coldly. If you want to die, why didn't you seize any of the many chances in the past 10,000 years? Lan Xiao couldn't keep his face straight. I'm just saying. What do you take it for real? Diwu Zhangzi held his forehead helplessly. The dangerous months had just ended, and they were arguing again. He really didn't know how he had been stuck between the two of them all these years. Besides, even if I'm really going to die, I have to see you, one more time before I die, right? Suddenly, Dugu Mabao's expression changed slightly, and he stood up. She's here. He turned around and glanced at Lan Xiao indifferently. You can die without regrets. Lan Xiao. Will it kill you to say something nice? Can't you see that I'm already in this state? Even if she's here, wait, who did you say came? Lan Xiao was about to scold him when he suddenly froze. Diwu Zhangzi had already reacted. He was delighted at first, then asked nervously, Yu is here. But this smile quickly disappeared when he saw Rongxiu standing next to him. Rongxiu nodded slightly. Senior Dugu. Chu Luiyue had long been used to Dugu Mabao's cold appearance, so she didn't care. She quickly went forward and asked. Debao, how are you doing? Also, how are Senior Diwu and Senior Lan Xiao? Wonderful book house. Chapter 2092. Dugu Mabao leaped into the air and arrived in front of the two of them in an instant. He landed on the sand dune and raised his wrist gently. The separated lake quickly closed and returned to its original calm state. Don't worry, we're all fine. Chu Luyue breathed a sigh of relief when she heard that. That's good. She had been very worried when she heard Diwu Zhangzi talk about the dangerous moon. It seemed to be very serious and dangerous. Diwu Zhangzi and the other two weren't ordinary people. Until now, Chu Luyue still didn't know how strong they were. The only thing she was sure of was that they were definitely more powerful than she expected. Even they found this dangerous moon tricky. It was not hard to imagine how dangerous the situation was. Suddenly, Chu Luyue's eyes focused and stared at Dugu Mabao. Dugu Mabao noticed something and asked, "What's wrong?" Chu Luyue did not speak. She walked straight to Dugu Mabao and pointed at his collar. "What's this?" Dugu Mabao was taken aback as he lowered his head to take a look. Only then did he see that his collar was stained with blood. The blood was only the size of a fingernail and had already soaked into his clothes. It was very inconspicuous. But Chu Luyue's eyes were sharp and saw it at a glance. Dugu Mabao frowned slightly. It should have been accidentally stained when he vomited blood at the end. Because she came at such a coincidence, he did not have time to check it carefully before coming out. It's a little blood. Dugu Mabao looked up. The expression in his eyes had returned to calmness. It's inevitable to get injured in the dangerous moon, but it's not a big deal. After he finished speaking, with a thought, a ray of light flashed, and the bloodstain disappeared completely. Under the illumination of the sun, his clothes were like armor, glowing with a delicate and light light. His tone was casual, as if he did not take this matter to heart at all. Chu Luyue scrutinized him, as if trying to determine if he was telling the truth. Dugu Mabao looked at her quietly. Chu Luyue felt a little helpless. Debao looked like a child, but in reality, he was an old fox who had lived for countless years. His intelligence and means were not lacking. If he really wanted to hide something, it should be very difficult for her to detect it. The two of them looked at each other for a moment, but Chu Luyue couldn't see anything. In the end, he could only give up. It's good that you're all right. She looked at the calm lake again. Where are Senior Diwu and Senior Lan Shao? Why didn't he come out? If it was in the past, they would have greeted her the moment she'd entered the Red Moon Desert. This time, however, it was strangely quiet. After Diwu merged with that aura, he has been recuperating. Lan Shao is thinking about reconstructing his divine body. Dugu Mabao's answer was flawless. Chu Luyue calmed down a little. Hearing Shi Yan mention the god body, he remembered the purpose of this trip. By the way, Debao, speaking of this, I have something to ask you. Speak. Chu Luyue paused and asked word by word. Previously, when you reconstructed your divine body, how did you do it? Dugu Mabao looked at her strangely. Weren't you there at that time too? She should be the one who knew best how he did it. Chu Luyue shook her head. No, what I mean is that ordinary cultivators can't do it with their own strength, but you've... Dugu Mabao's eyes showed a hint of dissatisfaction. I'm not an ordinary cultivator. Of course, I can do it. Who was she questioning? Chu Luyue. It had been so long, so his arrogant and conceited personality hadn't changed at all. She suddenly let out a long sigh of relief and couldn't help but rub Debao's hair. Debao's expression changed. Just as he was about to flare up, he heard Chu Luyue sigh. Hearing you say that, I'm relieved. Debao was still the same Debao. If he could say something like that, it meant that the situation should be fine. Hearing this, Debao paused. He looked up and saw her smiling brightly as if she had heaved a sigh of relief. The anger in his heart suddenly disappeared without a trace. Chu Luiyue was a little curious and asked excitedly. So, your strength is really above the venerable gods. Debao tilted his head and looked at her impatiently. His face said, do you still need to ask such nonsense? Chu Luiyue retracted her hand in embarrassment. Big brother, big brother. I can't afford to offend him. You came this time to ask about this. Debao's voice was already full of undisguised disdain. Chu Luiyue shook her head. No, I came this time to do two things. The first thing I want to ask is, do you know how to help a 9th stage warrior reconstruct his physical body? I've read many books, but I couldn't find the answer. Dugu Mabao narrowed his eyes. Who do you want to help? Chu Luiyue immediately told him about Su Li. There's really no other way, so I thought that maybe you would know. It's a small matter. He interrupted Chu Luiyue. What's the second thing? Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. He actually knew. However, before she could be shocked, she immediately said when she heard Dugu Mabao's question. The second thing is, I thought that I helped you reconstruct your divine body before, so I came this time to help Senior Diwu and Senior Lan Shao. Before she could finish speaking, Dugu Mabao's face darkened. No. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Why not? There's no why. Dugu Mabao's attitude was very firm. I said no, and it means no. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2093. His voice traveled to the bottom of the lake. Lan Shao finally couldn't help but scold, TSK, what's wrong with him? You already said that she wants to help. Why did he reject her? Does that mean that you can help him? I haven't said anything yet. Diwu Zhangzi glanced at him. Then you can go and say it now. They were trapped here and couldn't go out except for the night of the Red Moon. However, the entire Red Moon desert was under their control. As long as they spoke, that girl outside would definitely hear them. You want her to help? Pfft. Of course not. Then why are you talking about it? Lan Shao looked up. Wants to help me. What's the point of rejecting her? Even if I want to reject her, I have to say it personally. It wasn't easy for you, to show concern for him, but before he could get anything, he was mercilessly stopped by Debao. Who could stand this? Diwu Zhangzi reminded him. That girl can't come in now, and you can't go out either. You can't handle this. Lan Shao rolled his eyes. Humph. You only know how to pour cold water on me. Who said that she can't come in? Isn't Rongxiu here too? As long as he's willing to help, Diwu Zhangzi coughed. Lower your voice, Debao can hear you. Lan Shao choked, and his initial arrogance was immediately extinguished. Also, don't forget what your face looks like now. Do you really want to see her like this? This sentence hit the nail on the head. Lan Shao was enlightened, then he hugged his head in pain. How could I forget about this? He lay down on the side weakly and felt sorry for himself. My peerless beauty is ruined just like that. Diwu Zhangzi closed his eyes and couldn't be bothered with him. That face of his was changed every day, and he didn't seem to be in pain. Besides, when was he not like this? What was there to cry about? Chu Luiyue didn't expect Debao to reject so firmly and was stunned for a moment. Looking at Debao's solemn little face, she was full of doubts. It shouldn't be, didn't I help Debao before? Helping Lan Shao this time shouldn't be a problem. Moreover, Debao and the other two were very close. Logically speaking, Debao had no reason to reject her. Are you sure? Debao's expression did not change. He raised his eyes and looked at her steadily. That won't do. Last time was just an accident. The same thing will not happen again. Chu Luiyue was about to persuade him again when Debao continued, Lan Shao isn't useless. He will settle this matter himself. If he really can't, there's still me and Diwu. You don't have to worry anymore. That one sentence had pretty much sealed off all possibilities. Chu Luiyue frowned. She really didn't know what Dabao was thinking. But from the looks of it, he wouldn't be able to get anything out of him. She thought for a moment and nodded. All right. Since you've said so, then I won't interfere. However, you promised to help Mr. Su before, so I'll start right here. If there's anything wrong, it's convenient for me to ask you at any time, right? Dabao frowned slightly. It was really inconvenient to keep her here at this time, but if he rejected her now, it would arouse her suspicion again. She had always been smart. After thinking for a moment, he finally nodded. Okay. Under the scorching sun, the heat wave in the desert was overwhelming. Chu Luiyue stood on a sand dune and summoned the heavenly square cauldron. Mr. Su, you can come out first. As soon as she finished speaking, Su Li's figure flew out. She came to Chu Luiyue's side and looked around, only to find that there was no one else here except for Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue. She was stunned for a moment and asked cautiously, where's the senior you mentioned? Before coming to the Red Moon Desert this time, Chu Luiyue told her that she planned to come to the Red Moon Desert to look for a senior. That senior might have a way to solve her problem. But as far as the eye could see, there was only yellow sand everywhere. There was no one at all. Chu Luiyue smiled. That senior doesn't like to see strangers, so he has already gone back. But don't worry, Mr. Su. He does know how to help you reconstruct your physical body. I invited you out because I'm going to use the heavenly square cauldron to refine medicine for you. Su Li's eyes widened in surprise. Really? Chu Luiyue nodded with a smile. Of course. She knew that Dugu Mabao and the others didn't like too many people knowing that they were here, so before coming, she had already thought about it and decided not to reveal these things first. Along the way, although Su Li stayed in the heavenly square cauldron, now that the heavenly square cauldron had recognized Chu Luiyue as its master, she only needed to think about it to hide these things from Su Li. After asking Dabao, she officially invited Su Li out. Of course, before that, she and Rong Xiu had already changed places. The Red Moon Desert was vast and boundless, and the place where the lake was located was the most central and also the most confidential location. And this place was quite a distance from there, so there was no need to worry about being discovered. Su Li didn't suspect anything and immediately nodded in understanding. Since that senior even knew this, he must be a very powerful person. It was normal for such a powerful existence to not like the secular world. Then, please thank that senior for me. Su Li said seriously. Also, I've really troubled you with this matter. Chu Luiyue smiled. Mr. Su, don't be in a hurry to say these things. I know the method, but whether it will work or not is still unknown. It won't be too late to thank you after you really reconstruct your physical body. Su Li shook her head and smiled with her dimples. Whether it succeeds or not, Su Li will remember this kindness in her heart. Chu Luiyue blinked. Although Su Li had extremely high attainments in refining weapons and was considered famous in the entire Divine Ruins world, she didn't have much experience in the world and her personality was still pure and kind. It was no wonder that Tang Ku had deep feelings for her. She curled her lips into a smile and whispered, "You can just wait by the side first." Su Li nodded and walked to the side. She nodded and greeted Rong Xiu, and then began to wait quietly. Chu Luiyue took out the medicinal herbs according to the prescription given by Dabao and arranged them in order beside her. After a while, all kinds of boxes were densely packed around her. There were at least a few hundred kinds. But the key was that she didn't seem to be stopping until now. Su Li watched from the side and couldn't help but feel nervous. So many medicinal herbs. Chu Luiyue said while taking the medicinal herbs. Yes, the level of the pill to be refined this time is not low, so a lot of medicinal herbs are needed. Suli frowned slightly. It wasn't that she had never seen a celestial physician refining medicine, but such a lineup still surprised her. What level is it? Why is it so troublesome? Chu Luiyue paused and looked over. Great physician. Wonderful book house. Suli couldn't help but look at Rong Xiu, who was next to her, but she saw that his expression was the same as usual. He was calm and composed, without the slightest hint of surprise. It was as if he had expected Chu Luiyue to do this. Suli couldn't help but sigh in her heart. From the moment she left the wind separation cave, she knew that these two people were not simple. But she also didn't expect them to be so powerful. During this period, she had stayed with Chu Luiyue in Peach Blossom Cove for some time and heard a lot about Chu Luiyue. Naturally, this included the battle between Chu Luiyue and Yi Wentao. He fought against Her Eminence in the High God realm and won in the end. Since then, he had dominated Peach Blossom Cove. Suli had always thought that Chu Luiyue's talent as a martial artist and a Xian master was the best, but now she realized that she was very wrong. This person had the most outstanding talent in every aspect of cultivation. Time passed slowly. Suli watched from the side as Chu Luiyue refined the herbs bit by bit. Her initial shock gradually turned into acceptance. Most of the cultivators in this world were partial talents. They were extremely talented in only one aspect of cultivation and were lacking in other aspects. She herself was the best example. Even after she became a weapon-refining saint, her cultivation as a martial artist was still at rank 9 and she couldn't even break through to become a high god. Even if there were some people who had 2 or more talents at the same time, it was actually very difficult for them to do well in all aspects. This was because it required a lot of time and energy. It was already very difficult for an ordinary person to focus on one thing and stand out in one aspect, let alone others. But Chu Luiyue, this was truly heaven-defying. Suli sighed silently in her heart. Martial artist, Xian master, weapon refiner, celestial physician, she did all of them extremely well. Not to mention people of the same age, even many elders who had cultivated for many years might not be able to do better than her. This really depended on talent. Of course, it also depended on hard work. Both were indispensable. Other than that, Chu Luiyue also contracted 2 divine beasts, which were closely related to the 2 ancient divine beast clans. Such a person was simply too terrifying. Chu Luiyue focused on the heavenly square medicine cauldron in front of her. At this moment, she had already refined over 100 herbs. And this wasn't even half of it. While controlling the heat, she kept recalling the prescription that De Bao gave her in her mind. She was extremely cautious and didn't dare to relax at all. However, what made her feel a little relieved was that she realized that her alchemy skills had indeed increased compared to before. Chapter 2095. You did it on purpose. Why are you still asking me what's wrong? Looking at Dugu Maobao's self-righteous face, Diwu Zhangze almost scolded him. You really, meeting that pair of cold purple eyes, Diwu Zhangze's strong desire to live forced him to swallow the words that he was about to blurt out. He gave him a thumbs up and praised him insincerely. You're so smart. The coldness on Dugu Maobao's face faded a little. It's been so long, yet you're still a doctor. It'll be even worse if you don't spur her on. Since she came here on her own this time, it's a rare opportunity. Diwu Zhangze was speechless. Although it wasn't the first time Dugu Maobao did something like this. But every time, he could set a new low and set a new record. He was quite impressive. But every time, he had a good reason and made others speechless. Of course, this others was mainly referring to him and Lan Xiao. The reason why they succumbed time and time again was purely due to Dugu Maobao's authority. After hesitating for a while, he couldn't help but ask. Debeo, I know you're doing this for her sake, but she's still a doctor now. She hasn't even looked at the prescription of a doctor. You suddenly came and wanted her to try refining this level of pill. Isn't that making things difficult for her? Exactly. Lan Xiao stood up abruptly, crossed his arms, and sneered. It's so difficult to refine that soul-consolidating pill. If there's a mistake, all the previous efforts will be wasted and it'll be a complete failure. It's fine if this pill refinement fails, but what if the girl gets hurt? He was already furious because Dugu Mabao had rejected Yu's help for him. Now that he heard this, he couldn't hold it in anymore. Dugu Mabao glanced at the two of them coldly. Who said she hasn't seen it? The two were about to argue, but their expressions changed when they heard him. What do you mean? Dugu Mabao brushed the non-existent dust off his clothes and said calmly, she's seen it a few years ago. Diwu Zhangzi frowned. That's not right. You didn't show her a doctor's prescription. His voice suddenly stopped as he stared at Dugu Mabao in disbelief. Lan Xiao suddenly realized something too. You bastard. You mixed in the prescription of the great doctor. No. Dugu Mabao was calm and composed. I added some doctor's points into the prescription of a grand doctor. Chu Luyue naturally didn't know what was happening under the lake. She just felt a little strange. Although she had never seen the formula for the soul-concentrating pill, she found that it was much easier to refine than she had imagined. There were indeed many types and quantities of these medicinal herbs, but it was not troublesome to arrange them according to the order. However, this thought only flashed through her mind for a moment before she quickly suppressed it. If he could successfully refine it, it would naturally be for the best. Rong Xiu stood with his hands behind his back, quietly watching from the side. Suddenly, a gentle breeze blew over. An extremely faint fragrance filled the air. His brows moved slightly as he turned to look. That was the direction of Mirror Lake. And he couldn't be more familiar with this fragrance. It was the scent of the dancing lotus. He stared at it for a while, and there seemed to be waves gradually surging in his deep eyes. Then, he moved his fingers slightly, and a golden light flashed past. That faint fragrance quickly dissipated. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2096. This minute ripple did not attract Chu Liyue's attention. She concentrated on refining the various medicinal herbs in the heavenly square medicinal cauldron. Just this point alone consumed her an entire day's time. When night fell, she finally put the last medicinal herb in. The Red Moon Desert at night was exceptionally cold. On the sand dunes, a thin layer of frost seemed to have condensed. The cold air was bone-piercing. But fortunately, this was not considered a problem to Chu Liyue. In front of her, the transparent flame in the heavenly square medicinal cauldron burned continuously. The fire clearly lit up the surroundings. Under the dark sky, this wisp of fire was especially conspicuous. An increasingly rich medicinal fragrance spread out from within. Chu Liyue held her breath. The medicinal herbs were already refined. The next thing to do was to condense the pill. This step was even more complicated and hard to determine. The slightest bit of carelessness would result in a complete loss. Hence, Chu Liyue was even more cautious at this time. She started to fuse these medicinal herbs bit by bit. Su Li gasped in amazement as she watched by the side. So many medicinal herbs. Even if you let me remember, I also can't remember. You not only can put them in order, she can even control the fire and fuse their medicinal properties together. Truly incredible. She knew nothing about celestial physician. But she could also see how hard it was to refine this grand physician-level medicinal pill. And Chu Liyue was still so young. If she succeeds this time, she should be able to become the youngest grand physician in the divine ruins world, right? Suli heaved a long sigh. Even if she did not succeed, looking at Chu Liyue's series of skilled reactions, she should also not be far from breaking through. Condense. Chu Liyue gave a clear cry. The flame in the heavenly square medicinal cauldron suddenly pounced. All the medicinal herbs thoroughly gathered. A fist-sized medicinal pill gradually took shape. But right at this time, an explosive energy suddenly rushed out from that medicinal pill. Chu Liyue secretly cursed. She immediately controlled the flame to surge up, attempting to suppress it. However, the power condensed within the pill was too strong. It was simply not something that Chu Liyue could control when it suddenly exploded. Several streams of turbulence directly broke through the encirclement of the flames and rushed towards Chu Liyue. Rongxiu narrowed his eyes, but in the end, he restrained his impulse to make a move. Chu Liyue tapped the ground with his toes and quickly set up a barrier in front of him. Boom! Boom! The shockingly violent force fiercely slammed into the barrier in front of Chu Liyue, causing a series of explosions. Chu Liyue only felt a terrifying pressure crushing down on her, causing her feet to sink deep into the sand. Fortunately, this force came and went quickly. Stay here obediently and don't torment yourself. Lan Xiao clenched his teeth and laughed. Ha! If it was back then, how could such a small thing trap me? Dugu Mabao said calmly. Since you know it's not like back then, don't force yourself. Based on your current situation, it'll be extremely difficult for you to condense a divine body. At the mention of this, Lan Xiao finally fell silent. He half leaned against the wall behind him, lowered his head, and didn't speak for a long time. Diwu Zhangzi nodded. Big Bao is right. It wasn't easy to get through the dangerous months, and you can rest well. Speaking of this, he looked at Dugu Mabao with a headache. But this is easy to say, but it's very troublesome to do. Especially now that you, is still here. When she was here in the past, the situation wasn't so bad. Every time there was a dangerous month, they could use all kinds of reasons to send her away. They didn't need to spend much effort to hide everything. But now, I don't know how long she'll stay here this time. If the dangerous months come again, Dugu Mabao pondered for a long time. I keep feeling that she seems to have sensed something. If she can't personally witness you and Lan Xiao recovering your divine bodies, she probably won't leave so easily. On the surface, she said that she came this time to help Suli, but after meeting and talking with her, Dugu Mabao knew that this wasn't her only purpose. Diwu Zhangzi frowned. This is troublesome. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2097. That time in Dugu Mabao was already extremely dangerous, and it definitely couldn't happen a second time. However, with their current situation, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to condense a divine body. Dugu Mabao was silent for a moment and said, I'll take care of it. 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. Chu Liyue looked at the heavenly square medicine cauldron that was once again filled with flying ash inside helplessly. I failed again. This was already the 4th time she had failed. During these few times of refining pills, she had always been very cautious and careful, and every time, she would seriously learn from the previous failure. However, it was useless. The result was still failure every time. Even this time, she herself felt that there should be no problem. Lines had even begun to appear on the pill, but it was always a little short. Where exactly is the difference? Chu Liyue crossed her arms and rested her chin on one hand. She stared at the heavenly square medicine cauldron in front of her with a solemn gaze. The process of refining pills these few times kept replaying in her mind. She thought about it bit by bit, but she still didn't know where the problem was. After such a long time of high concentration, her mind and strength were consumed extremely quickly. She gently rubbed her temples. Rongxiu said, You take a rest first. Chu Luiyue nodded. It wasn't a solution to continue like this. If she didn't have enough energy, the result would be the same even if she tried countless times. Of course, more importantly, the medicinal herbs she had were only enough for her to refine one more time. If she used them up, she would have to go back. But she didn't plan to leave the Red Moon Desert now. She walked to Rongxiu's side and set up a barrier to isolate the terrifying heat. Then, she began to cultivate quietly. Rongxiu let Shui out. Go play by yourself. Roar. Shui let out a joyous howl before her snow-white, sturdy figure quickly disappeared from their sight. Those people were all resting now, and no one cared about it. Ha ha ha. It could be free now. When Chu Luiyue heard the commotion, she thought of something and asked in her heart, Dumpling, Ziqin, do you want to come out for a walk? Although the cultivation environment here could not be compared to that of the Peach Blossom Cove and the Yuntian Tower, it had the advantage of being spacious and sparsely populated. Sure enough, right after he asked, Dumpling immediately raised her hand excitedly. You. I want to go out. She had swallowed too much Tianlei some time ago. Now that she had all the strength in her body, she didn't know where to use it. Chu Luiyue smiled and released Dumpling. Go. Remember to come back when you're done playing. Dumpling happily pounced on her. Just as she was about to kiss her, she suddenly felt a chill at the back of her head. She quickly looked up and met Rongxiu's indifferent eyes. Dumpling chuckled and squeezed out a big smile. She obediently stopped what she was doing and changed to a flying kiss. You. Then I'll go now. Chu Luiyue pinched her chubby little face. Got it. Just don't go too crazy. Dumpling nodded vigorously. Just as she was about to turn and leave, she suddenly thought of something. She rolled her eyes and smiled. Ziqin, this is a rare opportunity. Why don't we have a fight? Not long after she finished speaking, Ziqin's figure slowly appeared. There was still no expression on his handsome and cold face. Okay. Chu Luiyue looked at him in surprise. Strange. Ziqin had never been interested in these things. She didn't know what had happened to him today. Why did he agree to fight with Tuanzi? Perhaps it was because he felt that there were no outsiders here, so he was more relaxed. Dumpling didn't think so much. When she saw Ziqin agree so readily, her eyes lit up with excitement and she rubbed her palms together. If you lose, you have to acknowledge me as your big sister. She still clearly remembered that she had been suppressed by him in the wind separation cave. Today, she had to get it back no matter what. Chu Luiyue held his forehead helplessly. It had been so long, but this girl still remembered the big sister thing. She was the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan and had the most noble and purest bloodline. Countless demonic beasts in the world would follow her lead. But she still wanted to be Ziqin's big sister. If Ziqin was just an ordinary three-eyed eagle, there would be no need to fight. But the key was that Ziqin had a part of the great phoenix dragon's bloodline flowing in his body. He was connected to Mao Zhen's bloodline and aura. If Dumpling fought against him, wouldn't it be equivalent to fighting against Mao Zhen? But the great Phoenix Dragon clan had always been on equal footing with the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. No matter what, Ziqin wouldn't admit defeat easily. These two would probably have a conflict in the future. Ziqin looked at Dumpling condescendingly and said indifferently. It's not too late to talk about it when you can do it. Dumpling snorted softly. With a tap of her toes, she transformed into a ball of reddish-gold flames and flew out quickly. Ziqin cupped his hands respectfully at Chu Luiyue before following her unhurriedly. The two figures quickly disappeared from sight. Chu Luiyue watched them leave and only retracted her gaze after a while. She wasn't worried about their safety. After all, this was Debao's territory. Usually, no one would come here. Even if they really caused trouble, it shouldn't be a problem. After resting for a while, Chu Luiyue felt that she had finally adjusted her condition and planned to try one last time. If it still didn't work this time, she would have to think of another way. Chu Luiyue stood up and clapped her hands to shake off the sand on her body. Suddenly, the ground trembled. Chu Luiyue paused. The sand under her feet began to flow at an astonishing speed. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2098. Chu Luiyue immediately became alert. What's going on? With her as the center, the sand was flowing towards the surroundings. Soon, the ground beneath her feet caved in, and Chu Luiyue's body uncontrollably fell downwards. She felt that something was amiss, so she took a deep breath and flew to the side. However, just as her feet landed on the sand dune, the same thing happened again. The sand in the previous position suddenly stopped moving, and the sand under her feet flowed towards the surroundings again. Chu Luiyue felt uneasy. She changed 2 more positions and found that it was the same. The coarse sand seemed to be attracted by some kind of power, forming a strange whirlpool on the ground. No matter where she went, the whirlpool would follow her. Rongxiu frowned slightly, and in a flash, he came to Chu Luiyue's side. His long arm wrapped around her slender waist. Then, a golden flame gushed out from his other hand. The flame quickly formed a boundary, sealing the whirlpool below. Chu Luiyue stood in the air, looking down at the situation below. Under the golden flame seal, the sand no longer flowed outwards, and the whirlpool gradually dissipated. In just a moment, everything returned to its original state. Rongxiu landed on the ground again with her. This time, the whirlpool did not appear again. It was as if what happened just now was just an illusion. However, Chu Luiyue knew that it was not so. Suli quickly went forward and asked, Are you okay? Chu Luiyue shook her head gently. Only a few whirlpools appeared, and she did not feel any threat. However, this was obviously not normal. What happened just now? Suli furrowed her brows and looked at the burning golden flame. Rongxiu raised his finger, and the flame quickly flew back. Facing Suli's question, Chu Luiyue fell into silence, and then shook her head gently. I don't know either. It wasn't her first time in the Red Moon Desert, but she had never encountered such a situation. She looked at Rongxiu. Did you feel something? Rongxiu reacted very quickly. Before she could figure out what was going on, Rongxiu had already made his move. She couldn't help but feel that perhaps Rongxiu had sensed something. Rongxiu squinted his eyes, and they were deep. He shook his head slightly. No. I just felt that there was something wrong with the situation. There seemed to be some strange power surging below. But as soon as I made my move, all the fluctuations and aura dissipated. I don't know what it is exactly. Chu Luiyue pursed his lips. Rongxiu's strength was above hers, so it was normal for him to sense the danger before her. If even he said so, then it would be really difficult to know what was down there. Maybe I should ask Dabao and the rest. Thinking of this, she was suddenly startled. Why didn't Dabao and the rest come out when such a strange situation was discovered in the Red Moon Desert? I thought that her first refinement was already outstanding enough. I didn't expect her to be able to do even better. Every time Chu Luiyue refined pills, there was an obvious improvement compared to the previous one. This time, from a bystander's point of view, it was even more pleasing to the eye. It was said that celestial physician emphasized talent. Now, it seemed that it was true. At the beginning, it was obvious that Chu Luiyue's actions were still a little jerky. But after a few times, her proficiency and sensitivity had almost surpassed all the physicians that Suli had seen before. Some celestial physician might not be able to do what she did in their lifetime, this could only be explained by the word talent. When Rong Xiu heard this, the corners of his lips curled up slightly. An extremely faint smile flashed across the corner of his eyes. But this smile quickly disappeared. His gaze silently fell on the spot where the vortex had disappeared, and a frosty look flashed across his eyes. At the same time, the hearts of the three people under the lake were in suspense. Diwu Zhangzi frowned and looked at Dugu Maobao with a worried expression. Debao, isn't the dangerous month already over? Why did that happen again just now? Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2099. Dugu Maobao's face darkened as he closed his eyes. I don't know either. Logically speaking, that thing shouldn't have appeared at this time. Maybe it's because the dangerous moon lasted for too long this time, so there's still some influence left. But we've already eliminated all those forces previously. Why is it still like this? Diwu Zhangzi was still confused. Dugu Maobao fell silent. Lan Xiao, who hadn't spoken for a long time, suddenly snorted. 10,000 years have passed. No matter how strong the seal is, there will be signs of loosening. Besides, didn't Ling Xiao college already? He didn't finish his sentence, but the other two knew what he meant. He raised his eyebrows and lay back down. Anyway, the following days won't be peaceful. The dark and cramped cage fell into a long silence. The air seemed to have frozen, cold and stagnant. After a long while, Diwu Zhangzi said, no matter what, luckily, Debao acted in time and you, didn't notice anything. The moment before Rong Xiu acted, Debao was already one step ahead. Dugu Maobao shook his head. She's always been smart and definitely wouldn't be unaware. Especially today's incident, which was too sudden and strange. She'll definitely be suspicious. She came here this time to help Lan Xiao and Diwu Zhangzi recover their divine bodies. Naturally, she would be more cautious when faced with such a situation. Lan Xiao said lazily, she'll know sooner or later. Don't tell me you think you can hide it from her forever. Dugu Maobao was silent for a moment. At the very least, we have to wait until she becomes a venerable god. A day passed. Chu Luyue put the last ingredient into the heavenly square cauldron. She stared at it and carefully controlled the flame. When all the medicinal effects started to merge, she made up her mind. Condense. The transparent karmic fire surrounded the center, and a fist-sized pill quickly condensed. Immediately after, Chu Luyue quickly activated the force in her body and controlled the reddish-gold flames to surge up and completely surround the pill. As the reddish-gold flames spread, the first pattern appeared on the elixir pill. Chu Luyue was delighted, but he still didn't dare to be careless. That was because there was a time before when vain patterns had already begun to appear on the pill, but he still failed in the end. She didn't dare to relax until the very last moment. As the two layers of flames burned, the pill gradually shrank. Not long after, the second pattern appeared on it. The origin power in Chu Luyue's body was rapidly depleting. At this moment, she couldn't help but rejoice that she had enough origin power stored in her body. Otherwise, if this trend continued, it would be very difficult for him to last until the end. Suli watched from the side and clenched her fists nervously. The previous few times, he had not been able to hold on to this stage. Maybe. I'm really going to succeed this time. While Chu Luyue was concentrating on refining the soul-consolidating pill, Dumpling and Zichen had already started. Boom! A reddish-gold fireball flew out and went straight for Zichen's face. His handsome and cold face was calm as usual. With a slight tilt of his body, he dodged the fireball. Bang! The fireball ran all the way and directly hit a sand dune. In an instant, sand and dust flew everywhere. At the same time, a howl suddenly sounded. Roar! A snow-white figure jumped up from behind the sand dune. A few scattered flames were still burning on its buttocks. Shwe shwe. Dumpling was stunned and widened her grape-like eyes. Why are you here too? Shwe shwe frantically rolled around in the sand, trying to extinguish the flames. However, the flames were too powerful, and this method didn't work at all. In the end, Shwe shwe directly froze its entire body to barely extinguish the flames. Sensing that the burning sensation had finally disappeared, Shwe shwe shook its body and shook off the layer of blue ice around it. It turned around and looked at its butt, and was instantly enraged. His originally round and chubby buttocks were actually burnt black in several places. The charred fur around it was still wrapped in fine ice shards. It looked very pitiful. Shwe shwe trembled. Ow, ow. What did she mean by it was here too? It was clearly here first, okay. It was just tired from running one round and found a place to rest, slack off, and enjoy a carefree life. Who knew that just as it fell asleep, its butt would be burned by a ball of fire? Dumpling tiptoed and saw Shwe shwe's pitiful appearance. She immediately stuck out her tongue in embarrassment. Ahem, Shwe shwe, I really didn't do it on purpose. Don't be angry. Look, you're so powerful. These superficial injuries aren't very serious to you. You'll definitely recover after a period of rest, right? Shwe shwe looked at the culprit with grief and indignation. Its face was full of complaints. Its fur. It took so much effort to take care of it. It would take a long time for it to grow back. It thought that it wouldn't have to go back in such a sorry state after coming to the Red Moon Desert this time. Who knew that an even fiercer one would come? Shwe shwe almost fainted when it thought about how it would have to look like this for a long time. How would it survive in the future? Dumpling looked at it and felt very embarrassed. So she put one hand on her waist and pointed at Zichen with the other. Look! Just now, it was because you dodged too quickly that Shwe shwe suffered. If you didn't dodge, it wouldn't be like this now. Zichen's brows moved slightly. Since we're fighting, it's normal for me to dodge. If there was anyone to blame, they could only blame Dumpling for attacking too quickly, or Shwe shwe for reacting too slowly. Dumpling snorted. You're still talking about it. We've been fighting for so long. I've always been the one attacking, and you've always dodged. You've never taken the initiative to attack. This fight is boring. Shwe shwe, ow. Weren't we discussing compensation for me? Why are you talking about your fight again? Even if both of you have the bloodline of ancient divine beasts, you can't treat other divine beasts as beasts like that. Zichen said calmly. You haven't used your full strength, so I naturally won't attack. In other words, Dumpling could only barely exchange blows with him if she tried her best. Dumpling gasped when she heard that. You. Just you wait, I'll show you the power of your big sister. Bam! Bam! 2 balls of reddish gold flames gushed out of her eyes. A shocking aura erupted from her body. Zichen narrowed his eyes and spread his feet apart. He put one hand behind his back and raised the other hand slightly, accumulating strength. Shwe shwe. Are they going to fight again? What about me? Shwe shwe, wait for me to subdue him and make him apologize to you. As Dumpling spoke, she clasped her hands together. The flames around her kept gathering and finally condensed into a reddish gold feather. Go! Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2100. As soon as he finished speaking, the golden feather flew out rapidly. It went straight for Zichen. At the same time, a purplish gold stream of light emanated from Zichen's palm and covered his entire hand in the blink of an eye. At first glance, it looked like it was covered in a layer of purplish gold scale armor. A suppressive aura that was not inferior to Dumpling's was emitted from his body. Zichen's body had fused with the great phoenix dragon's bloodline power. Moreover, he had Mao Zhen's support. Once he made a move, it would naturally be extraordinary. He raised his hand abruptly and moved, heading straight for the golden feather. It looked like he really intended to fight head-on. In the blink of an eye, the golden feather had already flown in front of Zichen. The surrounding space was almost torn apart by the astonishing power of the golden feather. Zichen clenched his hand into a fist and punched out violently. Boom! The two forces collided fiercely. Following this loud sound, the violent and vigorous forces began to fight wildly, and the aftershocks continued to spread to the surroundings. Two extremely intense and bright colors intertwined rapidly in mid-air, dazzling everyone's eyes. The sand on the ground was affected and flew into the air. Shue Shue, who was left to the side, did not have time to react before it ate another mouthful of sand. Its snow-white ball was finally covered by a layer of yellow sand. Shue Shue slowly lowered its head and looked at its dirty appearance. It could not help but grind its teeth. These two people were really going too far. Unfortunately, its reaction did not attract the attention of the two people on the other side. Tuanzi looked at him with bright eyes, and her heart was thumping excitedly. Zichen was finally willing to make a move. Previously at the Peach Blossom Dock, Zichen's strength was slightly higher than hers. Therefore, she was not convinced and always wanted to find an opportunity to compete with him. Moreover, now that she had broken through to the fifth meridian, her chances of winning were even higher. Naturally, she could not miss this opportunity. As the two forces continued to clash, the golden feather was gradually worn down, and the purplish gold scale armor on Zichen's fist also began to fade gradually. They were almost evenly matched. Seeing this, Dumpling hurriedly threw out another flame. Zichen looked up slightly, and a black feather also flew out. Bang! Dumpling's reinforcements were intercepted halfway. She was stunned for a moment, then an even stronger fighting spirit surged within her. So this was Zichen's real strength. That's great. Only then would the fight be interesting. However, just as she was about to continue attacking, she suddenly heard a subtle and strange sound. There seems to be a sound under the sand. Tuanzi was stunned and looked at the ground. Only then did she see that the sand seemed to be flowing towards the surroundings at an extraordinary speed. She took a step forward curiously. Zichen's pupils shrank. Be careful. But it was too late. Just as Dumpling's foot landed, a vortex suddenly appeared below her. An extremely strange force surged up from below, entangling her feet and pulling her down. Ah! The next moment, Dumpling's figure disappeared from the spot. Zichen immediately retracted his hand. The force backfired, causing his qi and blood to surge. However, before he had time to think about this, he chased after Dumpling and jumped into the vortex. In the blink of an eye, the two of them were swallowed up one after another. Shue Shue realized something and immediately jumped up to look down from above. Under the vortex, there was a thick darkness. It was like an eye coldly looking at the world. Digression, 60 clock. Remember the mobile version of the website. Chapter 2101. In the heavenly square cauldron, the reddish gold flame was burning fiercely. A crimson elixir was floating quietly. The last line was slowly being drawn. Chu Liuyu's forehead was constantly sweating, but before it could fall, it had been evaporated by the high temperature of the flame. Because she had used up too much energy, her lips were pale without a trace of blood. At this time, the passage of time seemed to be particularly slow. The sky gradually darkened, and the cold wind swept from the depths of the desert, brushing past her body, and the chills seeped into her bones. In front of her was the hot fire, and behind her was the cold wind. Waves of weakness came from her body. Chu Luiyue secretly bit the tip of her tongue, and a sweet and fishy taste spread between her lips and teeth. The sharp stabbing pain kept her extremely clear-headed. At this time, the last line on the elixir finally appeared completely. An extremely rich medicinal fragrance burst out from the cauldron. Chu Luiyue slapped the cauldron with her palm. The soul-concentrating elixir flew up in an instant. The reddish-gold flame gradually peeled off, followed by the transparent karmic fire. When the last bit of fire dissipated, Chu Luiyue jumped up, and her aura swept across, and put the soul-concentrating elixir into the jade box that had been prepared long ago. Bang! The jade box was closed, and Chu Luiyue fell back to the ground. She looked at the jade box in her hand, and could vaguely feel the fluctuations of the elixir inside. Soul-concentrating elixir, an elixir at the level of a grand doctor. The success of this elixir meant that she had officially stepped into the threshold of a grand doctor. The rich medicinal fragrance in the air did not dissipate for a long time. Chu Luiyue's heart beat quickly, and the blood in her body seemed to be boiling. She raised the jade box in her hand, turned her head, and smiled brightly at Rong Xiao and Su Li, who were standing not far away. It's done. At this time, the night was dark, and there were no stars or moon in the black velvet night sky. Beside her, in the transparent cauldron, a strong and bright flame was burning silently. The sparkling flame fell on her face, which was like a good porcelain jade. A pair of obsidian-like eyes were bright, and her red lips were raised in a bright smile. Congratulations, you, Rong Xiao's thin scarlet lips were slightly raised, and there was undisguised appreciation in his eyes. Although he already knew that she would succeed, he still felt happy when he saw her happy expression. Su Li also gave him a thumbs up and sighed sincerely. You are truly amazing. Without any preparation, he directly used this opportunity to break through to the rank of Grand Physician. From the first time she tried to refine the soul-concentrating pill until now, it had only been over 10 days and she had only failed 4 times in between. If this news were to spread, it was unknown how many people would be envious, jealous, and hateful. Chu Luiyue put away the cauldron. She thought for a moment and said, actually, although the level of this soul-concentrating pill is quite high, it isn't too troublesome to refine. Being able to succeed this time was also due to some luck. Su Li was speechless. Isn't this troublesome? Even until now, she still couldn't remember the order in which the herbs were put in. Chu Luiyue smiled and nodded. Yes. The soul-concentrating pill had a lot of herbs, but the refining technique was actually very simple. Among the prescriptions she had seen, it could only be ranked in the middle. Rong Xiao's sword-like eyebrows raised slightly, but he didn't speak. He had long noticed that Chu Luiyue's understanding of these prescriptions was a little skewed, and now it seemed that it was true. The soul-concentrating pill could be regarded as a very precious medicinal pill among the Grand Physician level. No matter from which aspect, it was definitely not simple. Even those experienced Grand Physicians, if it was their first time refining the soul-concentrating pill, they would rarely succeed in such a short period of time. But, now, there was obviously no need to say these words to her. Chu Luiyue didn't notice the slight change in expression on Rong Xiao's face, and looked at Su Li with a smile. Mr. Su, with the soul-concentrating pill, it will be much easier to help you reconstruct your body. You just need to find a suitable skeleton of a 9th-stage martial artist and you can. Suddenly, her expression changed, and she quickly turned her head and looked into the depths of the desert. Almost at the same time, Rong Xiao's eyes also sharpened. Seeing this, Su Li's heart instantly surged with an ominous premonition. What's wrong? Chu Luiyue didn't speak, but her brows were tightly knitted. Just now, she lost contact with Dumpling and Ziqin. No matter how she called in her heart, she could no longer receive any news from the two at this time. Since she contracted with Dumpling and Ziqin, this was the first time such a situation had happened. Chu Luiyue felt a chill on her back. After the magical beast and the human race contracted, they were connected to each other. Even if they were thousands of miles apart, they could still sense each other's existence. But now, it seemed that there was an extremely sharp knife that cut off the invisible connection between them. It was clearly fine just now. At this moment, Rongxiu suddenly held her hand. His palm was warm and dry, and he held her hand tightly with strength and gentleness. Obviously, he had already sensed Chu Luiyue's nervousness. The ironing warmth surged from his palms, bringing with it a reassuring strength. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and said word by word, Dumpling and Ziqin. I can't contact them. Rongxiu's brows moved slightly, and he immediately understood Chu Luiyue's meaning. He gently squeezed her hand and said, Don't worry. This is the Red Moon Desert, they won't get lost. Chu Luiyue nodded. If they really couldn't find them, they could only ask Debao and the others for help. Swoosh! At this moment, the sound of something breaking through the air came from afar. The few of them looked up and saw a yellow and white figure running towards them at high speed. It was Xue Xue. When it came close, Chu Luiyue saw Xue Xue's appearance clearly, and her expression changed. Its white and fluffy hair was covered with a layer of yellow sand. It looked dirty, and some parts were even knotted. But this wasn't the most important thing. Because there were several black burn marks on Xue Xue's butt. Xue Xue, you, just as Chu Luiyue was about to ask, Xue Xue quickly pounced over and bit the corner of her skirt. As it pulled, it let out a low whimper. Chu Luiyue suddenly realized something. Where are you taking me? Wait, your injury was caused by Dumpling. That aura was simply too familiar. Xue Xue nodded frantically and was still pulling desperately. Rongxiu suddenly said, It knows where Dumpling and Ziqin are. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. Really? Rongxiu nodded slightly and looked at Xue Xue. Just lead the way. Ow! Xue Xue responded and turned to run forward. Chu Luiyue asked Su Li to return to the heavenly square cauldron, and then chased after Xue Xue with Rongxiu. The cold night wind brushed past their faces. Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu ran at full speed, and the two figures quickly disappeared into the thick night. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2102. Xue Xue was as fast as lightning. Although it was accidentally burned by Dumpling, it was only a flesh wound and was not serious. Under its lead, Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu rushed into the depths of the desert. On the other side, Dugu Mabao and the other two had already realized that something was wrong when Dumpling and Ziqin were swallowed by the vortex. Why isn't it over yet? Diwu Zhangzi couldn't help but curse. First, they tried to attack you, Seeing that it didn't work, they changed their target to Dumpling. Now, even Ziqin is implicated. Debao, you didn't attack just now. Dugu Mabao originally had its eyes closed, but after hearing that, it suddenly coughed a few times, and blood flowed from its lips. Diwu Zhangzi and Lan Zhao's expressions changed. They had already fought. Debao. Youth, Dugu Mabao slowly opened his eyes. A dark glint seemed to flash across his eyes before disappearing in an instant. He raised his hand and slowly wiped the blood from the corner of his lips, and his eyes drooped slightly. The bright red color on the back of his hand deeply stimulated his eyes. I couldn't stop it. He had just gone through a dangerous month, and he was in a very weak state, so he couldn't use all his strength. As for the thing below, it was the opposite. In actual fact, ever since he noticed that the thing wanted to attack Chu Luiyue, he had been on tenterhooks and had maintained his guard up. When Dumpling was in danger, he immediately realized that something was wrong. Unfortunately, he still couldn't stop it. Diwu Zhangzi and Lan Xiao fell into silence. Dugu Mabao was the strongest among the three, and he was also the only one with a divine body. If even he said that, then, however, although I couldn't stop it, that thing is also injured. It should be obedient for a while. Dugu Mabao's words didn't make them feel at ease. That's Yu Er's contracted fiend. Lan Xiao leaned against the wall and covered his face with one hand as he said slowly, "Don't worry. She won't let it go. If I had known earlier, I would have warned her. That thing has been plotting for a long time. Now that it finally has the chance, it naturally won't let it go." Dugu Mabao's expression was cold. Don't forget, Dumpling is a crimson gold heavenly phoenix, and she has the purest bloodline. Even if it didn't happen this time, there will be a next time. Diwu Zhangzi sighed. That's true. But what should we do now? Lan Xiao and I are unable to leave this place in a short period of time. Only you can help you, Actually, Dugu Mabao's current situation wasn't optimistic. If it wasn't for him, Lan Xiao's life would have been in danger. He himself was also severely injured. Dugu Mabao slowly clenched his fists. Now that things have come to this, it's too late to stop them. Originally, he had planned to wait for her to break through to the Supreme God level. However, now that Dumpling and Ziqin had disappeared together, she would not leave so easily. Furthermore, the agreement back then clearly stated that we were not to confront that thing head-on. Once one party takes the initiative to break this agreement, the other party will be able to kill them completely. Now is definitely not the time to fall out with them, he said. Let's wait and see first. Under Xue Xue's lead, Chu Luyue and Rong Xiu quickly arrived at the place. When she saw the whirlpool above the desert, Chu Luyue's heart skipped a beat. This was almost exactly the same as the whirlpool that had appeared under her feet previously. It was just that this one looked bigger and deeper. Although they were still a short distance away from the whirlpool, Chu Luyue could already feel a cold and sinister aura slowly spreading out from inside. An invisible pressure enveloped the entire area, making it almost impossible to breathe. A thought instantly appeared in Chu Luyue's mind: this place is extremely dangerous. Xue Xue stopped and whimpered softly. Chu Luyue immediately understood what it meant. You're saying that Dumpling and Ziqin have both entered this place? Xue Xue nodded vigorously. Chu Luyue took a few more steps forward. At this moment, she and Rong Xiu were standing in the air above the whirlpool. She instinctively felt that if she went any further, it would be extremely dangerous. However, she could still clearly see the situation below from here. A whirlpool had appeared above the vast and boundless desert. Sand constantly gushed out from below and surged in all directions. The entire whirlpool was slowly rotating in an anti-clockwise direction. The deepest part of the whirlpool was pitch black. For some reason, the moment Chu Luyue looked down, she inexplicably felt as if she was being stared at by a pair of eyes. Cold, indifferent, evil, greedy, and crazy. Chu Luyue's heart instantly felt as if it was being gripped tightly by something. At this moment, a familiar feeling came to her heart. Suddenly, her eyes widened. She remembered now. This aura was exactly the same as the hand buried under Lingxiao College's mountain of wine. Peach Blossom Cove. The night was hazy. The pitch-black room was completely silent. Suddenly, Zhenyi opened his eyes and quickly stood up. He picked up his clothes from the side and put them on before quickly walking out. The moment he opened the door, 13, who was sleeping next to him, heard the commotion. He also got up and poked his head out to look over. "Big brother, what's wrong?" Zhenyi did not look at him. He said indifferently, "Go back and stay here." He hurriedly left as he spoke. 13 nodded and watched as Tsinyi quickly left. He could not help but frown. Big brother seems to be in a hurry. What is he going to do? Tsinyi walked out of the courtyard. He had just turned a corner when he bumped into someone. It was Chang Wanzhou. He blocked Tsinyi's path. Where are you going? Wonderful book house. Chapter 2103. Tsinyi glanced at him. Naturally, I'm going where I should go. Chang Wanzhou pursed his lips. I'll go with you. Tsinyi's eyes flickered as he carefully sized up Chang Wanzhou. He became alert. What do you know? Not many people knew that there was trouble on his master's side. Judging from Chang Wanzhou's appearance, not only did he know something, he didn't come later than him. Chang Wanzhou was silent for a moment. I don't know. I just felt uneasy and happened to see you come out. Tsinyi narrowed his eyes slightly as he scrutinized Chang Wanzhou with his long, narrow, and indifferent eyes. Chang Wanzhou met his gaze calmly. What he said just now was indeed true. For some reason, he felt that something was going to happen tonight. He had planned to come out for a walk, but he happened to bump into Tsinyi. Now, Chu Luyue and Rong Xiu weren't in Peach Blossom Cove. Everything was basically handed over to Tsinyi. Something was clearly wrong for him to suddenly come out in such a hurry. There was no need to guess. It was definitely related to Chu Luyue. After a brief standoff, Tsinyi stepped forward and swept past Chang Wanzhou. You're not qualified. He was saying that Chang Wanzhou wasn't strong enough. His tone was as calm and cold as usual, but it was precisely because of this that his words were especially sharp. Chang Wanzhou stepped forward again and stopped him. His soft golden hair fell down, covering his eyes and brows. It was almost impossible to tell under the night sky. He enunciated each word clearly. How do you know that I'm not qualified? Tsinyi couldn't be bothered with him. Just as he was about to turn and leave, he suddenly saw a totem faintly discernible between Chang Wanzhou's brows. He stopped in his tracks. A rare look of shock appeared on his usually expressionless face. Youth, Chang Wanzhou retracted his aura, and the totem quickly disappeared. Are you qualified now? Phoenix God Mountain. The Phoenix Shrine was brightly lit. The door of the temple was shut tight, and there was silence all around. Only Elder Yu was standing at the bottom of the steps in front of the door. He would look at the sky from time to time, then look at the Phoenix Shrine, as if he was waiting for something. His face carried a hint of nervousness. After a long time, the door of the temple opened, and a figure walked out. It was Yi Zhao. Patriarch. Elder Yu hurriedly went forward. How is it? Yi Zhao shook his head. Not yet. A look of disappointment appeared in Elder Yu's eyes, but it quickly dissipated as he consoled. This matter is extremely difficult to begin with. Our Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan has existed for so many years, and there are very few who have been able to open the 8th meridian. But now that you've touched the threshold, you still have a very high chance of success. If it doesn't work this time, maybe next time. If anyone else was here, they would definitely be shocked to hear this. Because the 8th meridian belonged to the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, a legendary level. In all these years, no more than 3 people in the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan had succeeded. Yi Zhao had spent most of his time in the Phoenix Shrine, and everyone in the clan thought that he was just cultivating as usual. After all, he spent most of his time here as well. Other than Elder Yu, no one knew that he was actually trying to open the 8th meridian. But the result was unsatisfactory, and after some effort, he still failed. Hearing Elder Yu's words, Yi Zhao waved his hand carelessly. I know all this. As the patriarch, and also the strongest existence in the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan closest to opening the 8th meridian, he knew better than anyone how difficult it was to cross this threshold. From the day he became the patriarch until today, he had stayed in the 7th meridian for far too long. Actually, he didn't have much hope in this matter, but for some reason, he vaguely felt that he seemed to have grasped the knack of it, so he was tempted. Naturally, it would be best if he could succeed. If he couldn't, he would have a clear conscience even if he tried his best. At this level, what was needed was not just hard work, but also talent and opportunity. Therefore, Yi Zhao was very open-minded about this matter. Seeing Yi Zhao like this, Elder Yi Yu also heaved a sigh of relief. But it would be a lie to say that he didn't regret it. If Yi Zhao could really open the 8th meridian, the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan would be greatly encouraged. "How is Dumpling recently?" Yi Zhao asked. Elder Yi Yu gathered his thoughts, and when he mentioned Dumpling, he couldn't help but smile. "I heard that some time ago, in the battle between Sheng Guanyu and Yi Wentao was defeated miserably. Dumpling also successfully opened her 5th meridian after that battle. This news had been spreading like wildfire in the entire Divine Ruins world recently, and it was hard not to know. However, Yi Zhao had been in seclusion recently, so he didn't know." When he heard this, Yi Zhao was both surprised and delighted. Really? So fast. It hadn't been long since Dumpling opened her 3rd meridian at Phoenix Godly Mountain. Yi Zhao originally thought that Dumpling would only be able to open her 5th meridian after a few more years. Unexpectedly, of course it's true. Sheng Guanyu is very powerful now, and it complements Dumpling. They are both successful. Yi Zhao was full of smiles, and he was rather emotional. Speaking of which, Ancestor really had a discerning eye. Back then, we didn't agree with Dumpling continuing to follow Sheng Guanyu, but Ancestor insisted. Who would have thought that this day would come? After hearing about the recent events, Yi Yu couldn't help but sigh. Dumpling following that woman was indeed the right choice. A faint smile appeared on Yi Zhao's usually cold and dignified face. Although it was just a flash, it was extremely rare. Ancestor has great foresight, and Dumpling is also very smart. There are so many cultivators in the world, but he chose the best one at a glance. As expected of the bloodline of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. His words were filled with pride. Elder Yi Yu silently glanced at him, too embarrassed to remind him. Who was the one who didn't agree to Dumpling forming a contract with Sheng Guanyu and even threatened her? As Yi Zhao spoke, he changed the topic. However, Sheng Guanyu. Previously, she said that she would bring Dumpling back to visit when she has time. It's been so long, so why haven't we heard anything? Yi Yu hurriedly said. Didn't they just occupy Peach Blossom Dock a while ago? They should be the busiest during this period of time. They will probably come back when everything is on the right track. Dumpling must miss us a lot, right? Speaking of this, Yi Zhao's expression softened. After pondering for a long time, he sighed softly. Dumpling has the purest bloodline and is extremely talented. She is also very smart. Opening the 8th meridian is extremely difficult for the rest of the clan, but it might be within reach for her. She might even be able to reach the peak in the future. Suddenly, his expression changed. Oh no! Something happened to Dumpling. Wonderful Book House. I didn't expect to see this scene again here, Chu Luiyue muttered softly. She still had a deep impression of the hand at the bottom of the myriad wine mountain. The mysterious existence under the vortex should be from the same sect as that hand, but there were some differences. She had wondered more than once what kind of existence could have such a terrifying pressure with just a hand. But she never had an answer. And now, this, she slowly clenched her fists. After experiencing that calamity, she knew very well that it was very difficult to fight against it with her own strength. If it wasn't for Debao's help at that time, thinking of this, her frown deepened. Along the way, she had summoned Debao many times, but she never got a response. Now, she didn't know how Debao and the other two were doing. If Debao had suppressed the hand in Lingxiao College back then, what about this? Chu Luiyue wasn't sure. An indescribable tension and irritation slowly surged from the bottom of her heart. She couldn't help but take a step forward. Suddenly, a cold and deep voice sounded in her ear. You. Chu Luiyue suddenly came back to her senses and looked at Rongxiu. In the depths of his deep eyes, she could see her tiny figure. And his hand was tightly holding her wrist. Rongxiu's sword-like eyebrows furrowed slightly. What were you thinking just now? Chu Luiyue came back to her senses and realized that she had unconsciously taken a step forward. If Rongxiu hadn't held her back, she probably would have gone straight for the vortex. Her back was suddenly drenched in cold sweat. Just a moment ago, she was clearly thinking that this place was extremely dangerous and shouldn't be easily approached. The next moment, she actually walked forward uncontrollably. Even someone as vigilant as her was lost for a moment and almost made a mistake. Rongxiu held her hand tightly. Step back. I'll go down and take a look. No. Chu Luiyue's first reaction was to refuse. On the one hand, the vortex was full of unknown dangers. On the other hand, Dumpling and Ziqin were both her contracted magical beasts. Even if someone had to go down and check it out, it should be her. In all aspects, she was the most suitable person. Rongxiu stepped forward and kissed her gently between her eyebrows. Be good and listen to me. His words were gentle, but his tone was firm. Chu Luiyue looked up in surprise as confusion flashed across her eyes. Rongxiu's attitude towards this matter had always been very firm. Previously, when they were at Lingxiao College, he wouldn't let her go no matter what. It was the same this time. Although it was dangerous, they had gone through life and death together more than once. Rongxiu didn't seem to have such a reaction when they encountered other situations in the past. Just as she was thinking, a fierce wind suddenly blew in the desert. Whoosh! The wind whistled and a thin layer of frost quickly condensed on the sand dunes. The surrounding temperature dropped rapidly and the wind was bitterly cold. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. The nights in the Red Moon Desert were always extremely cold. But this time, it seemed to be a little different. Boom! Suddenly, a roar came from the sky. Chu Luiyue immediately looked up and saw a round moon in the originally dark night sky. It was faintly discernible among the layers of dark clouds. The faint moonlight shrouded the entire Red Moon Desert as if it was covered with a layer of white gauze. Then, a sharp and strange sound suddenly came from under the desert. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. She immediately looked down. An eye suddenly opened. It stared at her from the abyss. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2105. It was indeed an eye. Chu Luiyue was shocked. Previously, she was only guessing. However, at this moment, she clearly saw that huge eye. It was scarlet, bloody, and crazy. As if it had been suppressed for thousands of years, it carried deep resentment and coldness. Chu Luiyue stared at it in a daze, and her mind went blank for a moment. Suddenly, a warm and strong hand covered her eyes, blocking everything in front of her. At the same time, she leaned back and fell into a broad and tough chest. A faint, cold fragrance permeated the air and enveloped her entire body, soothing her mind and calming her down. Rongxiu. Chu Luiyue covered Rongxiu's hand with both hands and muttered in a low voice. Did you see it? Rongxiu grunted, turned her around, and hugged her tightly in his arms. "Don't worry, I'm here." Chu Luiyue leaned in his arms, her forehead on his chest, and her vision was pitch black. She could clearly hear his strong heartbeat. She nodded, but her heart was still surging with waves. That eye was really powerful. It could bewitch people and confuse their minds without batting an eyelid. She thought that she was an extremely resilient person, but she almost fell for it because of her carelessness just now. If not for Rongxiu, she was afraid that eye, and the hand under the wine mountain belong to the same person, don't they? She asked softly. Rongxiu nodded, one arm wrapped around her slender waist, and his chin rubbed the top of her head a few times. Her hair was soft and smooth, and it also carried the unique cold peach blossom fragrance on her body. Rongxiu looked down. Her hair was tied up in a simple bun, and she didn't wear any extra hairpins. Only the peach blossom hairpin shone faintly in her hair. She had been wearing it ever since she got married. Rongxiu retracted his gaze and looked at the vortex below. It should be in existence above her eminence. Chu Luiyue didn't say anything. In fact, she had already guessed this. It wasn't that she hadn't seen her eminence before. Even the best of them, Iwentao, had been defeated by her. However, the mysterious and powerful existence suppressed below was much more powerful than her eminence. And this was only a part of the divine body. Rongxiu patted her shoulder gently and leaned over to her ear. His voice was low and reassuring. "Wait for me." As he spoke, he loosened his arm. At the same time, a golden flame flew out from his palm. In the blink of an eye, the fire formed a barrier around Chu Luiyue's body, completely trapping her in it. With a light tap of his slender and fair finger, the golden barrier retreated quite a distance. Until he was sure that she was safe, Rongxiu looked at the vortex again. The patience and gentleness on his face completely disappeared at this moment. A layer of frost quickly climbed up his eyebrows. His deep and unfathomable eyes were even colder and more dignified. He leaped up, and in the next moment, he was directly above the vortex. An astonishing force came from below, as if it was going to devour him. Rongxiu's clothes fluttered in the strong wind. The hazy moonlight and the dark night blended together. Dressed in white, he stood in the air, sacred and noble, like a banished immortal. However, his body was cold and filled with murderous intent. From afar, he looked more like a killing god who had walked out of hell. Chu Luiyue stared at him, and for a moment, she was in a daze. This Rongxiu was obviously very familiar to her, but there seemed to be some subtle changes, and it was a little unfamiliar. In fact, this wasn't the first time she had seen such a scene, and she had felt this way before. She remembered very clearly that when the unparalleled palace chased after Rongxiu and forced him to make a move, he seemed to be like this. It was also at that time that she first knew about Rongxiu's identity as the Holy Sun. At that time, she had not recovered her memories, but she had a deep impression of that scene. In the past, she did not pay too much attention to it. She only thought that Rongxiu would act like this when he wanted to kill someone. He had always been decisive, cold, and ruthless in killing. Otherwise, he would not have been able to obtain the position of the Holy Sun in the Yuntian Tower, nor would he have been able to establish his reputation in the Divine Ruins world, much less reach where he was today. But for some reason, Chu Luiyue felt a strange feeling in her heart as she looked at him. Suddenly, her heart skipped a beat. Rongxiu's current expression was very similar to their reflection in the mirror in front of the Peach Blossom Cove's enchantment. Chi! Rongxiu flicked his wrist, and the golden flame quickly turned into a long whip. If one looked closely, they would be able to see the sharp scales and barbs on the whip. Crack! Rongxiu lashed out with the whip. The sound of the whip breaking through the air resounded through the world and spread far and wide. At the same time, the whirlpool suddenly stopped spinning. A sharp and shrill sound came out from it. Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat. This sound was clearly clearer than the previous one, and it was even more chilling. Immediately after, the surrounding energy of heaven and earth seemed to be attracted by something and rushed over. The ground started to shake, as if something was about to rush out from below. A cluster of black flames rose from Rongxiu's eyes. His eyes were cold as he waved his hand again. Crack! Several golden rays flew out quickly and lay in the middle of the whirlpool. These golden rays quickly intertwined and formed a huge net, completely enveloping the whirlpool. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2106. The screeching stopped for a moment, and the place fell into a strange silence. However, Chu Liuyue's heart still felt like it was being gripped tightly by something. Because the surrounding energy of heaven and earth was still rushing towards this place. The abundant energy was like a surging river, pouring down towards the vortex. It was as if there was something in the depths of the vortex that was crazily devouring everything. The wind whistled. Chu Liyue could still clearly see the scene in front of her through the faint golden barrier in front of her. The ground trembled, and the yellow sand flowed. The rustling sound kept echoing in her ears. Suddenly, the eye blinked. Boom! The giant golden net dissipated with a loud bang. The violent energy scattered in all directions. Swoosh! A black rope suddenly flew out from below, heading straight for Chu Liyue. Seeing this, Rongxiu's eyes turned cold, and the golden whip in his hand turned into a ball of fire again. Then, he actually crushed it with his bare hands. Bang! Following this loud bang, the ball of fire turned into countless streams of light, and then quickly formed a giant Xian formation in front of Rongxiu. In the blink of an eye, the incomparably complicated patterns were outlined. As for the black chain, it was also blocked by the Xian formation. As if it had sensed danger, the chain quickly retreated, and disappeared into the vortex again. Chu Liyue widened her eyes in shock. So fast! It was definitely not easy to execute such a complicated Xian formation. If it was her, she probably wouldn't even be able to complete it. Suddenly, her gaze fixed. This Xian formation looked very familiar. Suddenly, a thought flashed in her mind. This was the Xian formation that was used to suppress the Thousand Wine Mountain, the Sky Shuttle formation. How did Rongxiu execute it? In a flash, the last stream of light finally converged on it. The complete and complicated Xian formation hung in the night sky, rotating quietly, and shining brilliantly. An indescribable pressure and aura spread from it. Even Chu Liyue, who was standing far away and separated by a layer of barrier, felt a little stuffy. She gasped in shock. Rongxiu was actually able to use the formation in such a short time. Could it be that he had already broken through to the Great Grandmaster realm? Without waiting for Chu Liyue to ask in detail, Rongxiu's figure moved. He leaped up and stepped on the huge golden Xian formation. Boom! Driven by this power, the formation began to descend. This speed seemed slow, but wherever the profound formation passed, large swathes of space would collapse one after another. Everything was quickly destroyed, as if it was nothing more than rotten wood. The distance between the Xian formation and the vortex was constantly shortening, and the power of both sides had also started to crazily slaughter each other. However, the profound formation still gradually gained the upper hand and destroyed the power below bit by bit. Finally, the golden array landed on the ground and sealed off the vortex. The surrounding heaven and earth energy no longer surged towards the center, dissipating separately. That shrill shriek was quickly extinguished as well. The yellow sand that had surged out earlier was now flowing back. Chu Liyue stood in the air and saw everything. She was almost in awe. It had only been a short while, but the situation had taken a 180-degree turn. And all of this was because of Rongxiu. Her gaze turned slightly and landed on Rongxiu. He stood in midair. After a fierce battle, there wasn't even a speck of dirt on his snow-white robe. If she had not seen it with her own eyes, it would have been hard to believe that he could use the sky shuttle formation so easily. One had to know that even the entire Lingxiao College's elders were helpless when they joined forces. If not for De Bao's help, Chu Luiyue would definitely not have succeeded. Furthermore, she was only repairing the sky shuttle formation at that time. Just this alone almost cost her half her life. And now, Rongxiu completely relied on his own strength to directly use it. A doubt once again welled up in Chu Luiyue's heart. How strong was Rongxiu? She originally thought that after this period of experience, she should be able to compete with Rongxiu. But once the sky shuttle formation was used, she understood that there was still a considerable gap between them. She had no idea when he had broken through, and there were no signs at all. As if sensing Chu Luiyue's gaze, Rongxiu suddenly turned his head and looked over. A ball of black flame flashed in his eyes. However, because there was a distance between the two of them, and Chu Luiyue was blocked by the golden barrier in front of her, she could not see this point. Rongxiu looked back. Under the suppression of the sky shuttle formation, the whirlpool was gradually shrinking, and the movement below was also fading away little by little. His figure moved, and he came in front of Chu Luiyue. He lifted his wrist slightly, and the golden barrier dissipated. Chu Luiyue looked at him with a complicated expression, and for a moment, she did not know what to say. Seeing the shock in her eyes, Rongxiu's thoughts moved slightly, but his expression was normal. What's wrong? Chu Luiyue opened her mouth and pointed downwards. That's the sky shuttle formation. Rongxiu nodded. Yes. When did you learn it? Also, this level of Xian formation, how did you? Rongxiu's thin lips curved slightly, and he smiled. When you were repairing the sky shuttle formation, I looked at it for a while. Chu Luiyue stared at him in disbelief. This meant that he only looked at it once that day, and he learned it. But, before it was repaired, the sky shuttle formation was incomplete. After it was repaired, the sky shuttle formation was quickly used to suppress the Thousand Wine Mountain. The complete sky shuttle formation did not appear for long. It's enough. Rongxiu's voice was as low and calm as usual, as if he was talking about something that had nothing to do with him. Chu Luiyue choked. Looking at Rongxiu's calm appearance, she was speechless for a moment. She now vaguely understood how others felt when they looked at her. It was really infuriating to compare oneself to others. At this moment, a strange sound came from below. Chu Luiyue and Rongxiu looked up at the same time, and saw that the vortex suddenly began to shrink at an astonishing speed. The surrounding yellow sand kept surging in, as if it was going to be completely flattened. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly sank. Dumpling and Ziqin are still down there. She originally thought that Rongxiu would force the other party to send Dumpling and Ziqin out, but she never expected the other party to be so stubborn. Rongxiu's expression turned cold, and he immediately shouted in a deep voice. Explode! Boom! Boom! The power of the sky shuttle formation instantly surged to the center, then condensed into a ball of flame and suddenly exploded. Suddenly, the ground shook violently. Yellow sand flew everywhere. A huge pit had appeared beneath the sky shuttle array. It was empty inside. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2107. Chu Luiyue had a bad feeling. Almost at the same time, Rongxiu attacked again. On the sky shuttle array, several fireballs exploded one after another. Boom! 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 With several earth-shattering explosions, a deep gully appeared in the vast desert. However, under the yellow sand, there was still yellow sand. Other than that, there was nothing. Rong Xiao frowned. Chu Luiyue was stunned for a moment, then immediately realized that something was wrong. Dumpling and Zi Qin had probably been swept away by the other party. She moved her feet and went straight down to the gully. Dumpling! Zi Qin! She shouted as she searched. Gradually, her body was enveloped by a chill. The connection between them and her had been forcefully cut off. She couldn't sense their existence at all. The most important thing was, that strange and gloomy aura had disappeared without a trace. It was as if the eye in the vortex abyss had never appeared. She stood in the deep gully. Because the flow had stopped, the yellow sand under her feet was covered with frost again. Other than that, there was nothing in front or behind her. She clenched her fists and muttered in a low voice, "It ran away just like that." Rong Xiao quickly rushed over and frowned. After checking back and forth a few times, he finally said, "It didn't run away. It just hid." Chu Luiyue turned to look at him. "Really?" Rong Xiao nodded. Although the sky shuttle array didn't completely kill it, it was still seriously injured. Under such circumstances, it couldn't have escaped. Besides, he paused. Besides, it's very likely that it has been here for a long time. It won't leave so easily. Chu Luiyue hesitated at first, but then she remembered the hand at the foot of Lingxiao College's mountain of wine and immediately believed it. What Rong Xiao said was indeed very likely. That thing was very strange. It had probably been suppressed for many years. But, if that's really the case, why did Debao and the others ignore it and allow it to exist? Rong Xiao glanced at her darkly. Did you forget that the thing at the foot of the Thousand Wine Mountain is the same? Chu Luiyue fell silent. That's right. If Debao and the others could deal with that thing directly, they would definitely not be merciful. But they didn't. I wonder if there are other difficulties. Moreover, Debao and the others had not given any response since Dumpling's disappearance. Thinking of this, Chu Luiyue turned and left. I want to see Debao and the others. In this Crimson Moon Desert, the three of them were practically existences that ruled over everything. Chu Luiyue did not believe that they were unaware of this. No matter what reason they had for not intervening, she had to personally ask them. It would be best if they could help. If they couldn't. Even if she had to flip the entire Crimson Moon Desert over, she would find Dumpling and Zi Qin. Rong Xiao's lips moved slightly, but he hesitated. He knew her temperament the best. She would never give up easily when she planned to do something. Moreover, everything that happened today had really crossed her bottom line. He stepped forward. I'll be with you. She's coming. She's coming. Diwu Zhangze was anxious. Dumpling and Zi Qin are missing. How are we going to explain this? Debao, say something. Dugu Mabao sat cross-legged with no expression on his face. Hearing this, he only frowned slightly and said coldly, noisy. Diwu Zhangze pointed at his nose in disbelief. I'm noisy. Wasn't I forced to do this? Debao. Get it straight. What time is it now? You is here to ask for an explanation. What are you going to do? You pretended to be dead before. You can't be pretending to be dead now, right? Hey. You're not really going to pretend that nothing happened, are you? How can that girl be dealt with so easily? Lan Xiao, who was leaning against the wall, said impatiently, Diwu, can you calm down? You're really noisy. Diwu Zhangze took a deep breath. You. Lan Xiao, you're on the same side as Debao now. Lan Xiao sneered and turned over. I can't be bothered. But he's not anxious, so why are you so anxious? Even if is looking for trouble, it should be his turn first, right? Dugu Mabao was the only one with a divine body among the three of them. Lan Shao crossed his legs. Even if the sky falls, he should be the first to hold it up. Although he's only a little bit now, it doesn't matter. We're underground. Dugu Mabao glared daggers at him. Lan Shao didn't care. He was telling the truth. So what? Diwu Zhangzi couldn't be bothered with the two of them. After so many years, they were still as unreliable as ever. Yu spent a lot of effort on Dumpling and Zichen along the way and doted on them like treasures. Now that something has happened, if she makes a scene, no one can escape. Diwu Zhangzi was so angry that he sat down. Let's see what you're going to do. As soon as he said that, a familiar voice sounded. Debao. It was Chu Luiyue. Dugu Mabao's expression changed slightly. Debao. I have something to ask you. If it's convenient, can you meet me? Beside the lake, Chu Luiyue looked at the calm lake in front of her and knitted her brows. Before he could finish, Dugu Mabao appeared in front of him again. Speak. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. You know what happened just now? Dugu Mabao nodded. Yes. Chu Luiyue immediately said. Then can you help? No. Dugu Mabao interrupted him. The three of us will definitely not fight him head-on. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2108. In that case, the three of them did know about the existence of the eye underground. Why? Chu Luiyue took a step forward and asked with a frown. Dugu Mabao looked at her indifferently. There's no reason. But back then at Ling Shao Academy, you were the one who did it, Dugu Mabao said firmly. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Only then did she remember that although Debao helped secretly at that time, he did not show up from the beginning to the end. In the Divine Ruins world, he seemed to be unwilling to do anything publicly. He even refused to admit this matter. Her mind raced, and then she asked, then, the whereabouts of Dumpling and Zichen, they're still here. Dugu Mabao raised his chin and his expression was slightly serious. All I can tell you is that it can't leave the Red Moon Desert. Chu Luiyue's eyebrows twitched. That's right. Of course, this was compared to Debao and the other two. Could it be, was it related to that thing that trapped them here? Whether or not you can find Dumpling and Zichen depends on you. As Dugu Mabao spoke, he turned around and was about to leave. After taking a step, he suddenly stopped. I'll be in seclusion during this period of time. Diwu and Lan Shao will be busy with the divine body and won't come out much. Everything, you can do as you see fit. With that, he walked forward. The lake water parted, and his figure quickly disappeared. A moment later, the lake water returned to calm. A gentle breeze blew, only causing faint ripples. Chu Luiyue stood in place for a long time. At this time, the sky was about to brighten, and a ray of white appeared on the horizon. From afar, the faint layer of frost that had condensed during the night was quietly melting. Quiet and desolate. Rong Xiao walked over, stood beside her, and held her hand. Chu Luiyue turned around and said, "It seems that I can only find them myself. I'll go with you. Fortunately, it won't leave the Red Moon Desert. This is much better than expected." Chu Luiyue heaved a long sigh of relief. Rong Xiao glanced at the surface of the lake, which was gradually calming down. Not angry. Chu Luiyue's lips curved up slightly as she shook her head. How could that be? Actually, Debao's refusal to help was within her expectations. So when she heard his answer, she was not surprised or dissatisfied. I know how they treat me. Clearly, there was another reason for this. Chu Luiyue had no idea who had trapped Dabeo and the other two in the Red Moon Desert. But now, she had a vague feeling that she had discovered something. The hand under the Thousand Wine Mountain and the eye under the Red Moon Desert, obviously, it was related to this. If we can find Dumpling and Ziqin, we might be able to help them. Chu Luiyue didn't finish his sentence. She turned around and looked at the vast desert behind her. Where exactly was that eye hidden? Dugu Maobao returned to the dark and cramped cage. Diwu Zhangze and Lan Xiao looked over. Rong Xiao has already asked what you wanted to ask. Dugu Maobao said calmly. You heard Yu Er's answer. From the beginning, he was not worried that she would find trouble with them because of this matter. Because she had always been extremely smart. Diwu Zhangze sighed with a complicated expression and said emotionally, I really didn't dote on her for nothing. Dumpling and Ziqin were very important to her. Now that they were suddenly missing, one could imagine the worry and anxiety in her heart. In comparison, Dugu Maobao's words seemed a little unreasonable. But fortunately, that girl was very open-minded about these things. The Red Moon Desert won't be peaceful for a period of time. I've already told her that we won't interfere. You mean, no matter what happens in the future, we'll just watch from here? Lan Xiao asked. Dugu Maobao looked at him expressionlessly. Other than watching, what else can you do now? In his current state, even if it was the day of the Red Moon, he wouldn't have the strength to go out. Lan Xiao choked. He wanted to defend himself, but Dugu Maobao was speaking the truth. He really couldn't think of anything to refute him. In the end, he could only harumph fiercely. When my divine body is reconstructed, I'll come out and fight with you. Dugu Maobao sat down. With a move of his palm, a Xian formation appeared in front of him. This Xian formation was very different from ordinary Xian formations. There was an unusually bright light spot on it. Diwu Zhangze and Lan Xiao were stunned when they saw his actions. Big Bao, what are you doing? Diwu Zhangze subconsciously straightened his body. His expression was solemn as he lowered his voice and asked. Dugu Maobao said calmly, of course, I'm opening the gate realm. You're crazy. Lan Xiao suddenly sat up. Because of the shock, his half-recovered face looked a little ferocious. The Red Moon Desert and the Divine Ruins world are connected by a door realm. That door realm is also an extremely secret place. You're opening the door realm now to attract those people from the Divine Ruins world. Dugu Maobao said, as long as we don't go out, they have no reason to come in. Lan Xiao choked. Although that was the case, these door realms had never been opened for many years. Even when they sent you, to the Divine Ruins world, they took a detour and went through Peach Blossom Cove. But now, you want to attract other people from the Divine Ruins world. Diwu Zhangze suddenly realized something and asked in surprise. Dugu Maobao nodded. Of course, she's not a match for that thing alone. Even if Rong Xiao is here, it won't be easy to deal with it. If more people come to help, maybe we'll have a better chance of winning. Diwu Zhangze and Lan Xiao looked at each other and were silent for a long time. Dugu Maobao's actions were equivalent to directly exposing them to danger. And all of this was for you, Although he said that he wasn't willing to help, he actually made such a decision secretly. Since you've already decided, we naturally have no objections. Diwu Zhangze nodded and sighed again. I only hope that all these things can be resolved before the next dangerous month. Lan Xiao suddenly turned around and closed his eyes. A ball of fire jumped in his palm. Diwu Zhangze asked curiously, Lan Xiao, what are you doing? Lan Xiao didn't even open his eyes and only snorted softly. Naturally, I'm reconstructing the divine body. Dugu Maobao isn't the only one who can help you, This time, we have to succeed no matter what. Dugu Maobao glanced at him, then quickly retracted his gaze and looked at the Xian formation in front of him. For a long time, this door realm had never been opened. But this time, he couldn't care so much. A faint glow shone on his face, making his purple eyes look even more demonic. Then, he raised his hand and lightly tapped on the Xian formation. Bang! A faint sound came from the Xian formation. That spot of light quickly spread out. At the same time, the divine ruins world shook. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2109. Yi Zhao, who had just arrived outside the Yuntian Tower, was shocked. He quickly turned his head and looked in the direction of the commotion. In the distant horizon, a ripple suddenly appeared on the curtain of light that fell from the sky. As the ripple moved, the energy between heaven and earth was greatly affected and surged along with it. Whoosh! A sound like a surging tide entered one's ears and shook one's heart. Yi Zhao's eyes flashed with deep shock. He said in disbelief. Suddenly, the void not far away fluctuated, and a figure walked out of it. Yi Zhao immediately looked at the person warily. When he saw the other party's face clearly, his expression froze. Mao Zhen rushed over and did not expect to meet an acquaintance. The two looked at each other for a moment, and the atmosphere was a little strange. The relationship between the two ancient divine beasts, the crimson gold celestial phoenix and the great phoenix dragon, had always been very subtle. In all aspects, these two families were on equal footing. However, they were extremely proud in their bones, and there were all kinds of comparisons between them, both overtly and covertly. However, because Chu Luyue had contracted Dumpling and Zichen respectively, these two families were once again involved. Therefore, it was somewhat awkward to meet now. However, Mao Zhen was strong and was the first to react. He greeted with a smile. Clan leader Yi Zhao, I didn't expect to meet you here. What a coincidence. Yi Zhao looked at him expressionlessly and said bluntly, it's a coincidence. We're both here to look for someone in the Yuntian Tower. Mao Zhen was a little surprised that his purpose was exposed. Then, he realized that something was wrong. His expression turned serious. Could it be? The two looked at each other again. They were powerful beings who had lived for thousands of years. Moreover, these two were very shrewd. Therefore, they quickly understood something with just one look. Mao Zhen frowned and asked, to be honest, I've cut off contact with Zichen. Yi Zhao paused. Same for Dumpling. The two of them fell silent, and the air seemed to have frozen at this moment. If it was only Dumpling or Zichen who had temporarily lost contact with them, it would be fine. But now, the two of them had disappeared together. This made people think more about it. Mao Zhen immediately said, let's go to the Yuntian Tower and ask. Just as he was about to make his move, a strange sound echoed from the distance. Hula! He was taken aback and turned his head to look. Only then did he see that there were two wrinkles on the light screen in the distance. And that sound just now was the surging energy of heaven and earth. How? Mao Zhen was stunned for a moment. Yi Zhao said in a deep voice, as you can see, another gate realm has opened. How is this possible? Mao Zhen subconsciously retorted. Previously, they only said that they were going out of the Divine Ruins realm, but they didn't say anything else. The two of them could come and go freely, so they did not explain in detail to 36 respected Elder Ming. As expected, they were not at the Yuntian Tower. Mao Zhen and Yi Zhao exchanged glances, then turned around and headed straight for the gate realm. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2110. Sigh. 36 respected Elder Ming did not expect the two of them to leave just like that. Just as he shouted, the two of them were already far away. He opened his mouth and swallowed the rest of his words. What were they doing? Who didn't know that the relationship between these two ancient divine beast tribes had always been in a delicate balance? Both sides rarely appeared together, let alone the tribe leader. The last time they came together, it was because of Rongxiu and Chu Liuyue's wedding. What was the reason this time? Furthermore, he had actually left after asking a single question. 36 Respected Elder Ming was puzzled when he suddenly saw a strange scene in the sky from the corner of his eye. He took a closer look and was instantly stunned. When he realized what had happened, he immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. A new gate realm has appeared. And that was also the direction Yi Zhao and Zi Jin had headed in. 36 Respected Elder Ming turned around without hesitation. The Divine Ruins world was about to change. It was not just Yi Zhao and Mao Jin. When the strange ripples appeared on the light screen in the sky, countless people in the Divine Ruins world were shocked. Countless cultivators rushed over from all directions without hesitation. A new gate realm had suddenly opened. It was definitely not for no reason. This time, they did not just want to seize the gate realm. They also wanted to see what was hidden behind this matter. For a time, the entire Divine Ruins world was shaken. Red Moon Desert. The sun was high in the sky. Chu Luiyue looked up. At this moment, she was extremely glad that she had already condensed a divine body. Even if she stayed here day and night, it would not be too torturous. The only thing that troubled her was that they had already searched here for 3 days, but they still could not find any traces of Dumpling and Ziqin. Previously, she could still vaguely sense a familiar aura at the vortex. Now, there were no clues at all. The Red Moon Desert was vast. Finding them was like finding a needle in a haystack. Not to mention, there was that strange eye causing trouble. This made it even more difficult for them to find them. She stopped in her tracks. If we continue to search like this, I'm afraid there won't be any progress. After that day, the eye disappeared without a trace and never appeared again. Just as De Bao had said, this was that thing's territory. It was more familiar with this place, so it naturally had the upper hand. If the other party did not take the initiative to appear, they did not know how long it would take for them to find him. Moreover, he might not succeed. Rongxiu frowned. There's been no movement from the sky shuttle formation. After Dumpling and Ziqin disappeared, Rongxiu decided to leave the sky shuttle array behind, even though he couldn't find them. Even now, the ravine seemed to have returned to normal, but in reality, the sky shuttle formation was buried under the sand. Once there were any fluctuations, he would immediately sense it. Chu Luiyue sighed. That thing is very cunning. It will definitely not appear in the near future. She narrowed her eyes and fell into deep thought. Rongxiu, who do you think that thing's target is? Rongxiu raised his eyes slightly and looked at her quietly. What do you mean? I have a feeling that it's not targeting Dumpling and Ziqin. Its real target seems to be me. Chu Luiyue rested her chin on one hand, frowned, and gently stroked her chin. Why do you suddenly have such a thought? Rongxiu asked faintly. Chu Luiyue shook her head. It's not all of a sudden. In fact, she had vaguely sensed this from the moment she saw the eye. Previously at Lingshao College, she rushed into the spring of Thousand Wine Mountain and accidentally touched the seal on that hand, which led to everything that happened later. Even though everything had calmed down, the scene from that day still vividly appeared in her mind. When she saw the eye, she clearly felt that she was being targeted. At the very beginning, that strange vortex had indeed appeared under her feet. She had jumped several times in the middle, but she could not get rid of it. In the end, Rongxiu had to intervene to solve it. However, not long after, Dumpling and Ziqin were in trouble. They were her contracted magical beasts, so it was normal for them to be implicated. Chu Luiyue fell into deep thought. Was it because of that hand, or was it because she had something on her that the other party wanted? Suddenly, there was the sound of something piercing through the air. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiao turned around simultaneously and saw two figures running towards them, one after the other. They were extremely fast and arrived in front of the two in the blink of an eye. You are indeed here. Chu Luiyue looked at the two people who suddenly appeared in front of her with a look of surprise. Senior Yi Zhao, Senior Mao Jin. Why are you? And, together. As soon as she asked the question, she immediately realized something. Are you here because of Dumpling and Ziqin? Yi Zhao nodded and immediately asked. The connection between me and Tuanzi was suddenly broken. Do you know what happened? Chu Liuyue's heart sank. She originally thought that Dumpling had just lost contact with her, but who knew, this was troublesome. To tell you the truth, seniors, I can't get in touch with the two of them right now. How is that possible? Yi Zhao's expression froze. Chu Luiyue was contracted to them. How could this happen? Chu Luiyue immediately explained the situation briefly. That's what happened. For the past few days, Rong Xiao and I have been constantly looking for them, but... Yi Zhao's face completely darkened. Mao Jin suddenly asked. Where are we? Red Moon Desert, Chu Luiyue said. It's also the territory of the Tianling dynasty. Mao Jin shook her head and stared intently behind Chu Luiyue. No. Look behind you. Wonderful book house. Chapter 21:11. Chu Luiyue turned around and was immediately shocked. At the end of the vast desert, a palace had appeared at some point in time. The palace was shrouded in a layer of faint white mist and could not be seen clearly. One could only barely make out a rough outline, but its specific appearance could not be distinguished. In front of the palace, a stone door stood tall, and a plaque hung above it. Unfortunately, the words on it were covered by the white mist and could not be seen. However, even so, one could still feel its indescribable dignity and majesty. It stood quietly between heaven and earth, like a creeping giant beast, waiting to ambush and devour everything at any time. Chu Luiyue stared intently. For a moment, she was actually unable to tell whether it was an illusory shadow or a real existence. But, she and Rong Xiao clearly did not see anything just now. Why did this strange palace suddenly appear after Yi Zhao and Mao Jin arrived? This is, Mao Jin asked, why would such a palace appear in the Red Moon Desert? Chu Luiyue was momentarily speechless and did not know how to answer. The Red Moon Desert was indeed the territory of the Tianling dynasty. Back then, in order to pacify the great desolate swamp, she had personally led an army here and fought several bitter battles. As for the Red Moon Desert, she had been here more than once. In total, the time she had spent here could not be considered short. But even so, she had never seen such a situation. After a moment, she shook her head. I don't know either, Mao Jin was somewhat surprised. He originally thought that Chu Luiyue should be quite familiar with this place. But judging from her reaction, it was clearly her first time seeing this palace. Then, he hesitated and asked, do you know how the two of us got here? Chu Luiyue was stunned for a moment. This question. With Yi Zhao and Mao Jin's strength, wouldn't it be a simple matter to come here? As if seeing through her thoughts, Mao Jin laughed bitterly and said, it seems that you still don't know that a new door has appeared in the Divine Ruins world. Chu Luiyue reacted for a while before he understood what he meant. His eyes widened in surprise. However, what Mao Jin said next shocked her even more. The two of us came from that gate realm. What? Chu Luiyue almost suspected that he had misheard. You mean, you and Senior Yi Zhao came here directly after crossing the Dao Gate realm? Mao Jin nodded. Not bad. Chu Luiyue subconsciously looked at Yi Zhao. Although the latter did not say anything, his expression said it all. If both of them said the same thing, then everything would be confirmed. Chu Luiyue's lips moved slightly, but his heart was in turmoil. She knew that she could go to the Divine Ruins world from the Red Moon Desert. After all, she had gone to the Peach Blossom Cove from here. But the situation of these two was clearly different. Yi Zhao said in a deep voice, "Now, everyone in the Divine Ruins world should already know about the existence of the Tao Gate realm. And because of the sudden appearance of the Tao Gate realm, it will definitely arouse the curiosity of many people and cause them to come." As he spoke, he looked up at the illusory palace in the sky. If they also see this scene, I'm afraid it will be even more troublesome. This was the first time such a thing had happened in 10,000 years. Who wouldn't want to pass through the Gate realm to investigate? Although this so-called Scarlet Moon Desert was outside of the Divine Ruins world, the palace was clearly an extraordinary existence. Chu Luiyue pursed her lips as countless thoughts flashed through her mind. Of course, she had thought of Yi Zhao's worries. But these things happened too coincidentally. Did it have anything to do with Dabao and the others? Mao Zhen narrowed his eyes and said with some uncertainty, "Could Zichen and the others be in that palace?" According to what Chu Luiyue had said, "That's strange, I couldn't leave the Red Moon Desert. And after Dumpling and Zichen were taken away, such a strange palace appeared." It was inevitable that people would connect the dots. Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment. "There's no point in guessing here. Why don't we take a look ourselves?" She was also filled with doubts about the palace that had suddenly appeared and was about to go over to investigate. It would be best if she could find Dumpling and Zichen. A cold glint flashed across Rong Xiu's deep phoenix eyes. His thin lips parted slightly. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly sensed something and his gaze froze. Immediately after, the space in front of Chu Luiyue trembled and two more figures walked out. Seeing them, Chu Luiyue was rather surprised. "Cin Yi, little Zhou." Cin Yi took a step forward and cupped his fists. "Greetings, Master, Your Highness." Then he looked up slightly and saw Yi Zhao and Mao Zhen behind Chu Luiyue. A hint of surprise flashed in his eyes, but it quickly disappeared as he greeted the two of them politely and respectfully. "Greetings, clan heads." Chang Wanzhou was behind him, but he was as silent as usual. Chu Luiyue's gaze swept across the two of them. "Why are you here?" Cin Yi paused. "Ever since you left Peach Blossom Cove, this subordinate has been feeling uneasy. After thinking about it, this subordinate decided to come over and investigate." This explanation was a little vague, but Chu Luiyue didn't pursue the matter. Cin Yi was extremely capable, especially after his rebirth. He was even more concerned about her safety. It was normal for him to sense that something was wrong and come here. However, Chu Luiyue didn't expect him to bring Chang Wanzhou over. Although the two of them knew each other, they weren't close. Cin Yi didn't even bring the other members of the 13th Empire, but he only brought Chang Wanzhou. It was really a little unusual. However, this wasn't the time to ask about this. She said, "Don't worry. We're fine. It's just that Dumpling and Zichen are missing. However, you came at the right time. We were planning to go over and take a look. Perhaps we can find them." Cin Yi and Chang Wanzhou followed her gaze and saw a majestic and mysterious palace standing between heaven and earth in the distant horizon. Because their backs were facing each other, Chu Luiyue didn't see the change in Cin Yi's eyes. When he turned back to look at Chu Luiyue again, his expression had already returned to normal. Cin Yi hesitated for a moment and asked, "Master, that place is strange." "Master, that place looks very strange. It might be dangerous. Are you sure you want to go?" Chu Luiyue looked at him strangely. It wasn't Xin Yi's first day following her. All these years, what kind of dangerous place hadn't she been to? Who knew how many life and death situations she had encountered? Why did he suddenly ask this time? She nodded without batting an eyelid. This might be the only chance to find Dumpling and Zichin. She had to go. Xin glanced at her and quickly lowered his head. Yes. Then this subordinate will accompany you. Wonderful book house. Chapter 21:12. Contrary to Chu Liuyue's expectations, after Xin asked the question, he didn't stop her. Instead, he directly agreed. It was as if that question just now was just a casual question out of worry. However, Chu Liyue knew Xin very well. He never spoke nonsense. But since he had already said so, Chu Liyue couldn't be bothered to pursue the matter. The most important thing was to find out what was going on over there. She nodded slightly. Just be careful. With that, she walked forward. Just as she took a step forward, someone approached her from the side. Rongxiu walked to her side and held her hand. Chu Liyue felt slightly relieved, and the corners of her lips curled up slightly. Just like that, the group walked towards the palace. Chang Wanzhou stared at the palace and vaguely felt a headache coming on. He rubbed his temples, suppressed these thoughts, and followed them. These people were all very powerful, so their speed was also extremely fast. However, the distance between them and the palace seemed to be the same as before. 2 hours later, Chu Liyue realized that the distance between them and the palace seemed to be the same as before. There were no changes at all. Sand dunes rose and fell continuously. As far as the eye could see, there was nothing but scorching sand. As Chu Liyue walked, she kept recalling the various ancient books she had read in the past. The Red Moon Desert had always been very mysterious to the world. Since ancient times, there had been very few rumors related to it. Chu Liyue had flipped through almost all the books in the Tianling royal family, but the contents she had read were very few. As for the books in the Divine Ruins world, needless to say, they had nothing to do with this place. Even if she racked her brains, she still couldn't figure out what kind of existence this palace was. After thinking for a while, she still couldn't find an answer. She gently squeezed Rongxiu's hand and asked in a low voice, "Rongxiu, do you know what's going on?" Rongxiu paused and shook his head. Chu Liyue felt a little regretful. Even you don't know. As far as she knew, Rongxiu was almost omniscient. He was always aware of many secrets that the outside world had never heard of. She had thought that she would be able to get something out of him. Rongxiu glanced at her. Her eyebrows were slightly furrowed, and her thick and long eyelashes trembled slightly. Evidently, this matter puzzled her greatly. He said, "Perhaps we'll know when we get there." Chu Liyue nodded. Suddenly, she stopped in her tracks and looked to her right. A few figures suddenly appeared. Chu Liyue saw a familiar figure. The group of people quickly noticed the presence of Chu Liyue's group. The young woman in the lead was stunned at first, but then she revealed a joyful expression. "Why are you guys here?" Chu Liyue smiled. "Senior Sister Rui, long time no see." These people had come from the meteor sect. The woman in the lead was Shi Rui, Shi Rui, quickly walked over. She blushed when she heard Chu Liyue's words. "We entered the academy at almost the same time. So, I don't dare to be called senior sister." Shi Rui hadn't been familiar with Chu Liyue in the past. However, she had been very grateful to Chu Liyue ever since she had saved her life. So, she had always been very close to her. "Oh right, I haven't thanked you for the list of medicinal ingredients." Shi Rui suddenly remembered something and said. She was talking about Chu Liuyue's agreement to do a medicinal ingredient business with the Meteor sect. She hadn't been clear about it at first, but she had inquired about it later. There were many aristocratic families and sects that wanted to establish a relationship with the Peach Blossom Cove. However, Chu Liyue had only accepted the orders of a few of them. And the Meteor sect was one of them. I had always wanted to personally visit and thank you. But I thought that you wouldn't have much time recently. So, I put it aside for the time being. I didn't expect that I would meet you here. Shi Rui explained. Everyone in the Divine Ruins world knew that Chu Liyue had occupied the Peach Blossom Cove and established the Yu residence. Now, even those first-rate aristocratic families and sects had to respectfully address her as Mistress Yu when they saw her. Shi Rui looked at Chu Liyue in front of her and sighed in her heart. Who would have thought that she would become such a person who could stir up such a storm in such a short time? Even though she knew that Chu Liyue wasn't an ordinary person, her speed and boldness still shocked her. Chu Liyue didn't seem to mind and smiled. That's not important. But why are you here all of a sudden? Shi Rui blinked her eyes. We're here because of the same reason as you. Chu Liyue was stunned for a moment. Then, she quickly reacted. You mean, because of the newly appeared gate realm? Yes. Shi Rui suddenly realized something. You, aren't you? Chu Liyue smiled helplessly. To tell you the truth, we've been here for more than half a month. We only just found out about the gate realm. Shi Rui nodded in understanding. Yes, Chu Liyue wasn't from the Divine Ruins world. What a coincidence. Shi Rui's lips curled into a smile. There was a hint of excitement in her words. This trip is really worth it. Huh? What do you mean? Shi Rui looked surprised. You still don't know. The news has spread throughout the Divine Ruins world. Everyone is saying that the secret to breaking through Her Eminence's shackles is hidden behind the newly opened gate realm. Chu Liyue frowned. What did you say? Shi Rui pointed at the palace on the horizon. She had noticed it when they had just arrived. Look. I heard that the secret is hidden in that palace. You should also know that no one in the Divine Ruins world has crossed that threshold for 10,000 years. This time, the gate realm has appeared due to a change in the heavens. We're not the only ones. Countless powerhouses in the Divine Ruins world are coming here. Wonderful book house. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.